What weird and wonderful facts keep you awake at night? The United States hasn't minted any new Purple Heart medals since World War II. We've been using the stockpile that was prepared in anticipation of the ground invasion of Japan. We were anticipating so many casualties. We can't prove we aren't in a simulation. Schizophrenia's hallucinations are shaped by culture. Americans with schizophrenia tend to have more paranoid and harsher voices or hallucinations. In India and Africa, people with schizophrenia tend to have more playful and positive voices. There's a really new treatment called avatar therapy. It has a computer character mimic the particular person's malicious hallucinations, but gradually over time its voice and expressions become more friendly and controllable by the patient. Apparently, this treatment has the effect of giving the patient more control over the hallucinations and either getting rid of them completely or making the hallucinations more positive in nature. Since its discovery in 1930, Pluto has not yet made a full orbit of the Sun. It went from undiscovered to planet to not planet in less than one Pluto year. The Giza Sphinx is so old that it was the ancient Egyptians themselves who performed the first restoration after digging it out from under the dunes over 1,000 years after it had been built. The sinking of the Titanic was a miracle to the lobsters in the galley. About 40% of the world's food is just wasted, and a lot of that is before it even hits the shelves. Cows kill more Americans than radical terror actors, most years. We should probably be turning the cows and the terror fighters against each other. There are now legally adult movie stars who were born after the year 2000. I remember IDing someone at my bar born in the year 2000 and being deeply unhappy when I realized that they were legally adults. All 6 of the stars of Friends negotiated 2% syndication rights for the show. Friends still makes about $1 billion yearly through reruns and Hulu and the other services. All 6 of the Friends collect a $20 million check annually. Yes, that means David Schwimmer still gets $20 million a year for doing nothing. So, when you're alone in your one-bedroom apartment, watching Friends and snickering about how all of them are losers who haven't been famous since, there's a reason why. They don't have to work, ever again. Well, this comment was written before the sad passing of Matthew Perry, but in aging has provided us with yet another example of the proven fact that being rich doesn't necessarily make one content or happy, and often does the opposite. Over the space of 3 days, an estimated 165 people survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bomb attacks. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is one of the more famous ones, who was only 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It hit when he was walking to work on the last day of a work trip. After he heard the drone of a plane, he looked up into the sky and then it lit up. He was plucked from the ground, spun around and tossed into a nearby potato field. Miraculously, he survived, despite being covered in burns, soaked in radiation and with 2 blown eardrums. He spent a night in an air shelter and then took an overnight sleeper train home to Nagasaki to see his family. When he made it to a hospital in Nagasaki, he was so burnt a childhood friend didn't recognize him. Neither did his family. Despite his wounds, he made it to work the next day. He started giving his boss a rundown on what had happened, and his boss thought he was crazy. There was no way one bomb could destroy a city. Suddenly, a bright light lit up the room. He panicked and dropped to the floor of the office seconds before the shockwave smashed out the office windows. He had just been hit twice by nuclear blasts in the space of 3 days. At the age of 93, he was given the title Niyu Hibakusha, or twice-bombed person. He died the year afterwards. So, next time you think you're having a crappy week at work, yeah. Google's DeepMind self-learning AI, AlphaZero, spent 4 hours learning chess and proceeded to beat the top chess engine in the world. The particularly interesting part is that it wins by playing in a very human way. Chess engines tend to run algorithms to assess the board after a move is chosen, looking at millions of moves every second, and decide whose is better based on a set of parameters, making their play very direct. AlphaZero seemed to develop a far more human playstyle, somehow seeing something less quantifiable than led to an advantage in position. Over the past 200 years, numerous chess masters studied a style of play similar to that of AlphaZero. That means that in 4 hours, AlphaZero developed a better understanding of the game than we could over the more than 1,000 years it's been studied. Lobsters just don't die of old age. Taking into consideration that humanity has only explored a small percentage of the ocean, there could very well be a big fricking lobster just chilling out there. And I should clarify that the square cube law prevents kaiju-sized ones, but there are still some pretty big ones out there that we don't really get to see. I saw one on the internet that was 4 foot long, had 2 foot long legs, and weighed 14 pounds. Still pretty cool. If you take into account the fact that on average people sleep or should sleep 8 hours a day, if and when you get to 99 years of age, you'll have only been awake for 66 years, having spent 33 years of your life sleeping. And that's why I always stay up late. As you get closer to a black hole, time goes slower. This means that everything farther away would experience time faster and faster as you get closer and closer to the black hole. A second for you could be a billion years for those outside of it. Thus, if you fell into a black hole and looked outside, you'd see the universe die with you. When Star Trek: The Next Generation first aired, Data was roughly 60,000 times faster than the fastest computer on Earth. Today, the same character, Data, is roughly 500 times slower than the current fastest computer. There is on average a supernova explosion every 50 years in the Milky Way. On average, there are 30 every second in the observable universe. This is probably one of the best let that sink in facts in here. Let me just repeat that. Do you know how big the universe must be if it's 30 every second, while one of them takes 50 years in our galaxy? Fanta started as a Coca-Cola substitute in the early 1940s Germany under the reign of, well, that party. Fruit Loops are all the same flavor. Next to the US Army, Disney World is the largest buyer and importer of explosives in the USA. I was wondering what Mickey needed nukes for before I remembered that fireworks exist. Oh-ho! Mutually assured destruction! There are more tigers privately owned in Texas than free tigers in the wild. The moon orbits us from the west to the east, but we see it move across the sky east to west because of the rate of the Earth's rotation. Our observation is like being in a faster car watching a slower car, heading in the same absolute direction, fall further and further behind us. If the Earth was the size of a marble, you'd need 7 miles of space to build a scale model of the solar system. Due to the way the speed of light works, combined with our current understanding of the expansion of the universe, there are areas of the universe that are both impossible for us to visit or even observe. The fabric of the universe expands faster over that distance than light can travel, so it never reaches us. When you combine that with the bit where scientists currently think there's roughly 1 trillion visible galaxies, that's 4 times more stars than exist in the Milky Way, well, there was a time in history when trees existed, but the fungi which causes wood to rot had not yet evolved to digest wood. Dead trees and plants would pile up, and the 35% oxygen atmosphere caused massive fires. This is also the time where petrified wood came from. Trees would sit in the mud for thousands of years and not rot, while minerals slowly replaced the wood structures. The first electric car was invented at the end of the 1800s, and it went 65 miles per hour. Yep. Mainstream electric transport has a very long history and has actually been a legitimate option for development the entire time. Unfortunately, it's almost always sabotaged, misused, or taken advantage of by bad actors. Classic humans. The entire continent of South America is east of Florida. Go look at a map. Charlemagne's name translates to Charles the Great. This wasn't due to his leadership, this was due to the fact that he was 6'4" when the average male was 5'6". His nickname was just Big Charlie. There was a period of time where 4 distinct species of human lived concurrently. Neutron stars have such strong gravity that if you dropped a marshmallow into one, it would be like dropping a 3-megaton nuclear warhead on Earth. It took humanity approximately 4 times longer to switch from copper swords to steel swords than it took to switch from steel swords to nuclear bombs. Bing Crosby advocated for salmon conservation in the North Atlantic against Denmark's overfishing in the early 1970s. The Danish government banned everything Bing Crosby in Denmark, but because he was so popular there, the Danish people protested the government, making them overturn the Bing Crosby law and even to enact salmon conservation legislation. Bing Crosby single-handedly managed to create a piece of Danish law. Scientists who work with cockroaches often develop allergies towards cockroaches. At the same time, they also develop allergies to pre-ground coffee. I work for a large coffee roaster. When you cut open the bags of green coffee from all of those third-world countries, it's amazing the things you find. Coffee is essentially dried in the middle of streets, and any number of things can end up in there. We found shoes, farming tools, huge needles for weaving the bags, 100% chance of bugs in coffee from some places, and the good news is those little guys are roasted to 400 degrees and disintegrated by the time the roast is over. The Titanic had two sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. There was a woman called Violet Jessup, a nurse and cruise liner stewardess that worked on all three ships. The Olympic crashed into a warship while leaving the harbor, but was able to make it back. So she was on Titanic as it sank, and is referenced in the Titanic film, a stewardess that was told to set an example to the non-English-speaking passengers as the ship sank. She looked after a baby on Lifeboat 16 until being rescued by the AmITheA the next day. It's not known what exactly caused the sinking of the Britannic, but the lifeboats hit the water too early. As the ship sank, the rear listed up and a number of lifeboats were sucked into the propellers. Violet had to jump out of the lifeboat she was in and sustained a serious head injury, but survived. She was on board for all three incidents in the space of 5 years. But she went back to continue to work at sea for another 30 years before retiring in 1950. She died of heart failure in 71. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. China at one point used more concrete in 3 years than the US used in the entire 20th century. There's about 12 times more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. There was only 65 years between the Wright brothers' first flight and the moon landing. The Holy Roman Empire existed until 30 years after the United States was founded. There are more chickens in America than people on the planet. Gwen Stefani is older than Ted Cruz. Didn't believe it, Googled, and it's true. That crap is bananas. When NASA pitched the idea of the Voyager mission to Richard Nixon with the idea of touring the outer planets, he was told that the last time it was possible, Thomas Jefferson was in the White House. The particular planetary alignment that Voyager 2 used on its journey occurs only once every 176 years. Your bones are wet. If the Sun were scaled down to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be the size of the continental United States. The vastness of space is mind-boggling. We are closer to the 2050s than the 1990s. If you live in the USA, you have better odds of dating Taylor Swift than dying of bird flu and Ebola combined. Oh, now you're just trying to scare us. In the span of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, the Cleveland Browns won 1 game. The man who invented the Frisbee was cremated and turned into a Frisbee. Anne Frank and Martin Luther King were born in the same year, and Queen Elizabeth and Marilyn Monroe were born 1 month apart. Stegosaurus lived 150 million years ago. T-Rex lived 65 million years ago. Stegosaurus was more ancient to the T-Rex than the T-Rex is to us. The Great Pyramid was built before the last woolly mammoth died. So it appears that after the first batches of answers here, a lot of the facts that seem to blow our commenters' minds are just the sheer scale of time in the universe. Admittedly, it is fascinating to get the perspective, but I'll try and spread them amongst the other rarer answers that we're getting here. Vending machines have killed more people than sharks. Well, duh. Why would vending machines go around killing sharks? Pineapples take 2 years to grow. You could place all of the planets of our solar system between Earth and the Moon and even have a bit of spare space afterwards. But 10 out of 10 scientists all agree that this is a bad idea and should not be attempted. The US federal government classifies the white powdery stuff as a less serious, more useful substance than Mary J., also known as green herb. When humans first started farming, blue eyes in humans hadn't evolved yet. The cigarette lighter was actually invented before the match. Dozens of Americans die every day from slipping in the shower and hitting their heads. Dozens, I tell you. It's one of the primary leading causes of non-medical deaths in the USA. After hitting the iceberg, it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to fully submerge underwater. Let that sink in. The more I think about it, the more I realize that it took people quite a while to realize how significant it was, and that getting off a huge ocean liner would take so much time. The US Navy has the second largest air force in the world, and the US Army has the third. The UK Dyslexia Association is situated in Reading, which is spelt like the word reading just to mess with everyone. Gary Newman is older than Gary Oldman by a little under 2 weeks. What's new is old and what's old is new. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump were all born within a 66-day stretch. Macaulay Culkin is now older than Catherine O'Hara was when she played his mum in Home Alone, and Mark Hamill in The Force Awakens is older than Alec Guinness was in A New Hope. If you have clean water and temperature control, you're better off than half the population. Sharks are older than trees, or at least they predate them. The oldest shark fossils we know of are 420 to 450 million years old. The oldest known tree is Watiza, which is about 385 million years old. AITA, the longest living animal ever, was a giant tortoise given to Clive of India. He was born around 1750 and died in 2006. When he died, he had existed for longer than the United States had at the time. Your computer is much more likely to contract a virus by surfing legitimate church websites than by surfing adult websites. The latter sites generally have experts combating viral stuff, while church sites are maintained by lower-tech volunteers as a rule. The overall goal in golf is to play less golf, incidentally analogous to my approach at my job. Oxford University is actually older than the Aztecs. Let me explain. The University of Oxford, informally Oxford University or simply Oxford, is a collegiate research university located in Oxford, England. It has no known date of foundation, but there's evidence teaching goes as far back as 1096, making it the oldest university in the English-speaking world and the world's second oldest university in continuous operation. It grew rapidly from 1167 when Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. After disputes between students and Oxford townfolk in 1209, some academics fled northeast to Cambridge, where they established what became the University of Cambridge. The two ancient universities are frequently jointly referred to as Oxbridge. The Aztec Empire, or the Triple Alliance, began as an alliance of three Nuhua, Altepetl city-states: Mexico, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. These three city-states ruled the area in and around the Valley of Mexico from 1428 until the combined forces of the Spanish conquistadors and their native allies under Hernan Cortés defeated them in 1512. France was still using the guillotine when the first Star Wars film came out. To be in the top 1% of Americans in terms of income, you need to rake in about $400,000 a year, rounded off to about $1,000 a day. The US dropped 26,172 bombs in 2016. That's almost 72 per day. That's about 3 bombs an hour, every hour, for the entire year. In 2017, the US had already dropped more bombs than that by September. Your body consists of a roughly 1-to-1 ratio of bacterial to human cells. Tasty, tasty. You hear that, folks? We're about 50% germs. Remember to eat enough food to share with everybody in your body. If you make the choice not to have children, you're the first person in your direct ancestry, all the way back to the first humans related to you, to do so. Actually, you'd be the first organism in your line not to reproduce all the way back to the very first organism 4 billion or so years ago. A real trailblazer. Great fact. The Teotihuacan pyramids, known to be the most architecturally significant Mesoamerican pyramids, were not built by the Aztecs. The Aztecs found them abandoned, settled there, and gave them their names. The origin of their founders are still a mystery. I studied Mesoamerican cultures in college for some reason, and it's not that great of a mystery. There's not a consensus on what the people called themselves because they'd vacated by the time the Nahuatl or the Aztecs arrived. However, it's pretty safe to say its founders were from around the mountains of northern central Mexico, and archaeologists actually know quite a bit about their culture. It's amazing and also terrifying knowing that a civilization capable of building something like that could just vanish without a trace. It's the same thing with the canal system in Arizona. It was built by a native tribe and abandoned, and no one knows why. Being able to move all of that water around the desert was and is an incredible infrastructure achievement, and then they just left. The majority of the first American settlers only survived their first winter by eating their dead children. I mean, it makes sense. Have you tried eating them while they're still alive? Astronomer here. I always like that the coldest place we know of in the universe is on Earth. Even a dense dust cloud in space, aka the coldest spots we know of, are a few degrees above absolute zero, the coldest temperature there is. In laboratories on Earth, however, it's quite common to get a few fractions of a degree above absolute zero for experiments. Ergo, you don't remember being born or most of the first year of your existence. All you know is one day you just started existing and taking in experiences and memories. Scientists haven't found out one particular brain component responsible for consciousness. There is no physical proof of consciousness, it just is. All that stuff you learn about in history class about civilizations rising up and dying out, and about certain groups killing off others and taking over their lands, that stuff is still happening right now. Snipers are supposed to camp. The overwhelming majority of hands you've touched in your life have had a man's eggplant in them at one point. About 1 million people die every year from mosquito bites. That's 2,700 per day or 100 every hour. Think about how many must have died since you first started watching this video. Cleopatra was born closer to the moon landing than when the pyramids were built. A single iPhone today is more powerful than every computer NASA had combined in 1969 during the first lunar landing. They got people to the moon using slide rules. Red, green, and yellow peppers are just the same plant at different levels of ripeness. How is this not upsetting to everyone else? Every subsequent year of your life makes up a smaller proportion of it relative to your previous years of living. So at 1 year old, a year is 100% of your life. At 2, it's 50%, and so on. Maybe that's why time feels like it passes more quickly the older we get. There are more Mary J. dispensaries in Colorado than McDonald's, 7-Eleven, and Starbucks combined. The city of Atlanta in Texas is closer to Atlanta, Georgia, 3.5 states away, than it is to El Paso, Texas. That's just how big Texas is. Also, Bristol, Tennessee is closer to Canada than it is to Memphis, Tennessee. If you have 2 legs, you strictly speaking have more than the average amount of legs across the entire human population, and literally only one person would need to lose a leg to have this happen. Averages are weird. The average hours of minimum wage work needed to pay for 4 years of public college was 306 hours for baby boomers and is 4,459 for millennials. The universe is so empty that if we took 3 grains of sand and placed them inside a vast cathedral, that cathedral would be more filled with sand than the universe is with stars. When did you realize that HR was definitely not your friend? Got pulled into a meeting with 2 HR reps in the middle of my shift. Taken to this really nice boardroom, which was confusing because I was just a grunt, and this is literally floors above where I should ever be. They sat me down and basically said, "What do you have to say for yourself?" Me, still confused, tells them I have no idea what they're talking about. Everyone was really quiet and serious, and I'm scared out of my mind. And they say, "You know what you did. This is cause for termination, blah blah blah." I'm literally thinking this is really excessive for being a few minutes late sometimes. I insist I don't know what's going on. One of them maybe realized something was wrong and flips open a file and says, "You're XX, right?" Turns out they got me mixed up with someone else who has the same name. On the elevator ride down by myself, I was still sweating. Don't know what that other person did, but man, HR does not play. Oh yeah, and nobody said sorry. I should add, this is Canada, where we have a special sorry law where saying sorry doesn't constitute admission of guilt because we all say it so much, so they totally could have apologized. I had the Air Force Office of Special Investigations do that crap to me back in like 2002 or so. I got told the OSI called and wanted me to go over to their office. I got interrogated for about 10 minutes, them accusing me of doing white snow and hanging out with some other guy I barely knew. After me arguing with them for those 10 minutes or so, they finally said, "Aren't you this airman?" He had a super common last name, and I was like, "Yeah, but there's multiple airmen with that last name in my shop alone." Yeah. Turns out they meant a different person completely. They saw my last name and never checked my ID or asked my first name. I had to get right into the investigation because they messed up. I went to HR to report that my team's manager was illegally shorting all of our paychecks. HR's response was to adopt a new company-wide policy addressing the paycheck issue and backpaying most people for a certain amount, and also to frame me for work avoidance. HR and IT disabled part of my login account to a tool we used, and then fired me a few months later after failing to fix the problem and allowing me to actually do my job. They tried to deny my unemployment claim afterwards, told unemployment rep that they had logs showing that I did something to break the tool I don't even have access to break in the first place. They also didn't think to disable my email address in a timely manner, so I was able to back up all of my emails with IT documenting exactly what went down. Unemployment approved my claim and hit them with a major penalty to their insurance. This entire thread will likely hammer home something that I've said in an earlier video. HR is there to defend the company from unnecessary damage from its personnel. Whether the best way to do that is removing you or the person you have a grievance with is more important than any actual justice. I work in Sweden. I had a friend recruited to an identical position as mine. I had to tutor him for a year, given that I have more work-life experience for that gig. He came in earning 1,000 euros a month more than I did. When time came for salary discussions for me, I used this example and my manager tried to pass that along to at least align my salary. The HR partner responded that they didn't want to make that drastic raise because, and I quote, "there might come a time where he and me wouldn't do the same things as now, and if that happens, we can't downgrade his pay, and he would therefore be overpaid. This is because 2 other team members had been demoted and now make manager pay for less work. We do the same job, but they make double of what I do. I got a minor raise that year due to my boss asking the other team members to give up a small share of their annual raises to be able to align my salary. Quite insane that they actually had to do that. Still not anywhere close to being aligned. On Monday comes this year's salary discussion. The madness is to be continued. Delivery-wise, I perform better than they do. They're 10 and 20 years older than me. The friend I mentioned is 1 year younger than me. HR ordered me to downgrade my 3 excellent employee reviews to satisfactory because management didn't recognize their names. I got written up for telling my employees this. HR denied that they told me anything, even though I had the emails from them documenting it. Totally worth it. My employees were excellent and got the raises they deserved. I saw a similar situation. The company has a policy where 10% of the workers had to get bad performance reviews, which meant no raise for that year. What the company didn't take into account is that some teams are small and hyper-specialized. You can imagine what happened next. A bunch of crucial employees quit and that policy was cancelled, but the damage was already done. I fight this every year. Their argument is that part of the job should be going above and beyond the call of duty, so when people do a good job, that's technically satisfactory work, which warrants the same merit increase as everyone else. When I ask what the metrics are for exemplary work, they straight up told me that executive leadership isn't allowing any exemplary ratings this year, and that generally nobody should be able to get an exemplary rating. My counter is that hard work should be rewarded to encourage further hard work, and ask if they want to send a message that the company is only willing to encourage the bare minimum. Yes, that's what we prefer. The 3-point scale should just be a 2-point scale, nobody should get a 3. Isn't that some crap? Co-worker accidentally backed his company truck into my personal car while it was parked. He alerted me and our local manager immediately. We took photos, filled out the incident report, yada yada yada. Everyone in our office was in agreement about what happened, that it was an honest accident and the company's insurance should cover the cost of fixing my car. Then the HR director got involved. First, he tried to get me to assume liability since it was my personal vehicle that caused the accident. My car was parked in the parking lot and I was inside at my desk when it happened. When I pointed this out, he backed down and said he would file the claim. Next, I got a call from a hostile insurance adjuster from my company's insurance demanding that I provide my insurance information or they'd be pursuing legal action. It turns out the HR director had filed the claim saying that I'd run into the parked work truck with my car and tried to flee the scene, but was witnessed by a coworker who reported me. I informed the adjuster what had actually happened and emailed her the photos and signed incident reports and witness statements that we'd filled out, and she changed her tune pretty quickly and said she'd get back to me. The next day I get a settled agreement from HR asking me to accept $1,100 for repairs and to sign a form releasing the company from further responsibility. I'd only just dropped my car off at the body shop and hadn't even gotten the estimate back yet. I declined and was told that I either had to accept their offer or be out of luck. At this point, I reached out to my own insurance and told them what happened. As I went through the sequence of events, I could hear my agent getting almost giddy about the blatantly illegal tactics HR had tried on me. In the end, they processed my claim and pursued my own company's insurance through subrogation. He also mentioned that they would probably be seeking additional damages due to falsification of statements in the initial claim. You don't F with USAA. In the end, the damage ended up costing over $4,000 to fix, but I didn't have to pay a cent, not even my deductible. I don't know if the HR director experienced any consequences, But there was a comment in our finance VP's year-end report about needing to reduce extraneous costs due to reporting delays and inaccuracies in liability claims. The HR payroll manager at a small hospital I worked at had a bad habit of not paying the sign-on bonus that was paid out incrementally in 3 payments through the course of a year, and sign-on bonuses for picking up extra shifts. After repeated requests to be belatedly compensated, I took it to corporate, who addressed my issue immediately. A couple of weeks later, I was terminated on what amounted to a technicality where I forgot my badge one shift, and my relief was late to take over sitting with a patient, causing me to receive more points against me than if I'd called out for that shift. When I was called in to receive my notification, the director of nursing was shocked, but ultimately there wasn't much she could do. I'll revise my earlier statement. 90% of HR's job is controlling damage to the company. The other 10% is dishing out vengeance when they're brought to task for their evil behavior. Overall, I've been able to get along with HR departments with one exception. I was working a help desk job for a company during college, and the head of HR called in for help. He was making an Excel spreadsheet and couldn't figure out how to make a formula do what he wanted. I offered to come and take a look as we were in the same building, and he told me I couldn't because the spreadsheet was full of confidential information. So I asked then if he could describe exactly what he was trying to do without giving away any specific information, and he told me what he was trying to do was confidential. So I clarified that he wanted me to tell him how to do something, but I couldn't see it and he wouldn't even tell me what he was trying to do. At that point, he agreed that I wouldn't be able to assist him since he couldn't divulge anything. As soon as we hung up, he called my boss to complain that I was useless. "That there is a top-tier Class A moron. You have my sympathy." They already said it was the head of HR. Calling him a Class A moron is redundant. HR hired consultants to run morale-building employee input sessions, basically saying, "We're not from the company. You can tell us all the things you don't like about working here and would like to see changed, and we'll put it all into a report for management. Don't worry, everything's anonymous. We just need material for our report, and you guys get to have your say in improving things around here." Turns out HR and the consultants recorded all the sessions and played the highlights for management. People were disciplined for criticizing the company or their immediate superiors, and any shred of faith or trust in management that the employees may have had was instantly incinerated. Managers now complain that they don't know what's going on in their teams because nobody tells them anything. I wonder why. I worked at a smallish company that grew big enough to hire an HR person. Her office was down from mine, so in the mornings I'd swing by and say hi. That turned into grabbing a cup of coffee together, then into having a pastry and talking about life. I found that if I mentioned someone's name in passing, a few minutes later she would spill the beans about that person's life. What work issues they had, health issues, family issues, and other things. I learned really quick any issues I had not to take them to her. She made it about 6 months before she got fired. Damn. This was like the HR supervisor of my former company. She didn't have any formal training in HR but still got the job because of connections. She'd tell anyone she was close to confidential details about certain employees like their health and family issues. She would also divulge information that only the management should know, like business negotiations, and it was all voluntarily done. Anyone with formal training who worked under her never lasted a year. Last I heard, they finally hired an HR manager she would report to. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I asked my boss for a desk phone with a speakerphone function because sometimes I need it at work to conference people on the phone with people in my office. We'd had these old yellow phones, so he told me to make a request to him and CC our office manager, and he'd send it to the HR department of our region via email. So I put forth a nice email outlining what I'm requesting and why I need it for HR's request. My office manager replies all and asks HR, per his request, should I order the phone through the same channels I've used before, or is there a new policy? HR responded, completely livid. She demanded to know why I needed this phone, it was in the email, and then accused my office manager of going behind HR's back and ordering phones before without approval. My office manager told my boss, who called HR and chewed her out, and I could hear yelling. My boss came out of his office and yelled at me. "See what you've caused?" He was fired up, but I know he didn't mean anything maliciously by it. I just laughed. HR had to apologize to office manager for accusations. Turns out, after everyone yelled their fricking lungs out for an hour, the speakerphone I needed was literally free and we had boxes of them in storage. I had it for a month before HR rolled out fancy new phones that were actually expensive and convoluted, requiring training to set up and use. At the company picnic, we had to wear fricking name tags, and I'd never met HR lady face to face, and she came up to me and said, "Oh, haven't we met? What's your name?" And I was trying to hide my name tag, but she read it and didn't seem happy to see me. I never understood why HR had to okay the purchases at my old company too. My coworker ordered stuff for our department, and one of the few things she put down was Kleenex, which our boss said was fine because we were running low. HR sees it and sends a long email to both my coworker and boss saying we were wasting money and had to cancel the order because there were some in a storage cabinet. To be fair, none of us knew, and that cabinet was located outside our department room. Our boss looked through the purchases before ordering, but for some reason HR was always strict and wanted to know why we were purchasing certain things. We need those binders for our project. What other reason would we buy them? And my last real job before striking out on my own, I had an exit interview with the HR lady, who was actually just someone who was friends with the company president, who was filling in because the actual HR lady with a degree in HR and everything quit. A lot of people at this place quit, actually. It was a terrible place to work with out-of-touch management and delusions of grandeur limping along building websites for a business niche that was mostly old people who thought the internet was magic. During the exit interview, she asked why I was leaving. I told her I liked my co-workers a lot but hated the company. She got this exasperated look and got genuinely upset and told me she had been getting that same line from everyone else who quit and had their exit interview recently. It boggled my mind that they could hear the same thing over and over again from so many people putting in their time until they could go on to something better and not stop to think that they should change something. I mean, this might be the closest thing to an honest and decent HR rep that we've heard of in this thread so far, but it took someone not formally trained in HR to actually get it. HR person used her position to collect intel to get people she didn't like fired. Office survey. I put in some honest opinions of a member of my team. They were fair and honest criticisms of a system which was not working as designed. I had little contact with the system, but the whole thing seemed reasonable to me. I was in fact demoted for this, a position was created above me, and a colleague who was my equal was to be my manager. The position didn't exist before. This happened the same week my husband died, and the management felt like crap because of the timing. But still, on my return to work, I was basically called out for criticizing the same system in a whole company meeting, and it was explained how X system should and did work, and anyone who thought it didn't work was stupid. Cut to 2 years later. Person above me quits, partly because they're scared to tell company that anything's gone wrong because of how I was treated, and they have to promote me to that position because it now exists according to the rules and I'm the only one who can do it. Again, in a whole company meeting, they admit X system isn't working and we're having a consultation to find out why. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I had to leave the room before it turned into hysteria. One of our departments shut down at noon thanks to an HVAC issue. Building management needed to move cubicles and pull out a chunk of drop ceiling, so the manager took them all out to the bar for a team-building exercise. Everyone in the department arrived the next morning to a final notice in lieu of termination on their desk that cited drinking on the job and time theft. The manager had an extra special third for improper use of a company credit card. None of what they'd done was against company policy, so the manager's boss, a vice president, called HR and told them that whatever newbie had written them to back the heck off. HR instead forwarded over a brand new policy manual and told the VP to make sure all the write-ups were signed and returned by the end of the day. The VP goes up the chain to his boss, the CEO. The CEO hadn't even seen it before, let alone authorized it. HR doesn't want to back down even when the CEO calls them. Sure, he hadn't authorized it, but he'd asked them to consider revamping it back in March. This was the glorious revamp. They'd gone back to square one and completely rewritten it. It's full of best practices, industry standard rules, and easy-to-understand language. Oh, and they'd been enforcing it since May, so it would probably be best for him to just sign off on it, and any concerns he found could be incorporated in a future revision. Yeah, no. The CEO didn't make it past the first page before finding a contract law violation. Page 3 had a federal labor law violation, page 4 would make the NLRB angry, and the section on PTO would get them sued 6 ways to Sunday. The head of the HR was asked to resign. When she refused, she was fired. Okay, this lady is a champion of the worst kind. Fires a whole department without approval, fights VP, fights the CEO, gets asked to resign, says F you, I'm staying, and then gets fired. No fear at any single point. After 4 years on the job, I was given a first and final warning for asking why the heck HR was behind a locked door and now dominated over half the first floor, filled with new furniture that was unused after 6 months. Meanwhile, my chair was taken by another employee and I was told to use the chair without padding. An executive from another department heard my complaint, stole one of the unused chairs from the HR expansion and gave it to me, explaining that if I'd done it, I'd have been fired. She did it, daring them to fire her. Good on the exec. After doing this entire thread, I'm beginning to feel like Michael Scott was completely justified in his mistreatment of Toby Flenderson in the office. Obviously, there are probably HR reps who are fine, but if the only way to care for your employees is to fight the people who claim they look after them, broken system. Not HR, but heed my warning, don't type anything into your work computer that you wouldn't say directly to your company's HR person's face. I've seen people had cases built against them for poor work and ultimately fired for the crap they say over Skype. I work in a mobile environment and have a company-issued tablet, and I bring my own tablet to work too. Why? Because company stuff stays on a company tablet and personal stuff on my own tablet. I don't even check personal emails with my company tablet. It's like in TV shows when the company goes through company emails and they see all the crap people have said about them or management through company emails. I've seen enough comments on Reddit of that happening, and I always ask, who the frick talks shot about a company on company email? I worked in a warehouse that regularly concealed the shipping of dangerous goods to save money. This went on for years. As time went on, I bubbled up through the ranks and was eventually made manager of the warehouse. I outright refused to ship anything anywhere until we started to claim our dangerous goods shipments properly. Their solution? The boss started to sign his name instead. This went on for a few weeks until HR found out. They obviously knew how much trouble the president could have got into. So next time a shipment had to go out, they got the newest guy in the warehouse to start signing his name instead, claiming they were training him how to do paperwork, but the poor kid had no idea. So when the driver showed up to pick up his shipment, I told him that there were a bunch of dangerous substances concealed in the shipment. So he refused it and left. I got told later that my actions were damaging to the company image and it had to stop. I told HR exactly what was going on and how I would not be a part of it. Less than a week after that, I was removed from my position due to company restructuring and laid off. Some of the most crooked crap I've ever seen. My rough estimates ballpark the money they saved at about $250,000 per year. Scumbags, the whole family. I reported inappropriate advances to HR at a large international company when I was 21. They notified my harasser, an older VP, before I'd even made it back to my desk. I was fired a few days later despite an excellent performance review the week before he propositioned me. Upon giving 2 weeks' notice, I got this stupid rant about millennial snowflakes, how we can't take the stress of a real job, and how we think we're so important and unique. But in reality, the only thing that would happen is that they'd find another engineer to fill in for me, and things would be like I never existed. After the initial shock, I replied with, "You're absolutely correct. Me staying on or not is meaningless. Consider my resignation immediate from this moment. Please give me the paperwork to sign." A skilled nursing facility I worked at got bought out by another company. New management comes in and starts cracking the whip and basically doing everything they can to decrease morale. What happens is predictable. People that have been employed in the building for 20 years start quitting left and right. Patient ratios start going up while more work is required. They lose so much staff that they resort to using a medical staffing agency, and the place has about half the staff on payroll to actually function independently. That management team has all left, but the effects are still withstanding. HR was the boss's sister, and the boss was a narcissist. The sister and HR had very little actual life experience because they both came from a big pharma family and never had a sense of what working a real job was like. The boss could do no wrong in his sister's eyes, so complaining about anything just got you gaslit. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. During an exit interview with my last job, HR asked me where I was going to go next. HR, so what's the name of the company you're moving to next? I'm not really comfortable disclosing that. Are you sure? It would really help us out. I'd rather not say. It's company policy that you need to tell us. I said no, and if you continue further, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. They gave me the shocked Pikachu face. I told my old boss this after I left, and he was absolutely shocked. HR have no right to know anything about the next place you're moving to. It's literally none of their business, but they tried to press it out of me anyway. More than likely to call them up and talk crap about me. What was the scariest, creepiest, or most unsettling experience of your life? 15 years old. I'd just got home from work, so I went to my bedroom to change out of my work clothes and get ready for bed. I'm in the middle of undressing when I look to my bedroom window to catch my reflection, and I see a man's face. I drop to the floor and turn off the lights, scrambling to get dressed, still watching the window. The face is gone, but I'm still watching. Then, a freaking camera. No face, just a camera pointed at me sitting on the floor. I bolt from my room and tell my mum and brother. My brother went outside and our ladder from the backyard was just laying there, but nobody around. Couldn't sleep for a year after that, just stared at that window. Haven't thought about this in years until now. When I was around 16, my rapidly growing family finally moved from the house I'd spent my entire life in. As you'd expect, we spent a lot of time fondly remembering things we used to do in the house as we were packing everything up. At some point, I decided to go into the downstairs closet with a flashlight and read, something that I'd used to do when I was younger to get some peace and quiet. Now, this is one of those very deep closets that goes under the stairs. It went back about 8 feet and then had a left turn into a very low, maybe 3-foot high space. This space was largely occupied by a mountain of old blankets and stuffed animals. Of course, this is the most fluffy spot to sit in and read. About an hour in, I shift a little to get comfortable, and I hear a low, slow, warped, hoarse voice say, "You'll always make me happy." I flipped my crap, hit my head on the low ceiling, and practically broke the door down getting out. After hyperventilating and explaining to my family why there was no color left on my face, I went back to see what it was. It was my stuffed little bear from when I was 3 or 4 years old that I happened to lean on just right to press his belly. But when I pressed on his stomach again, though, nothing. That poor bear I hadn't played with since I was a toddler used the last of its power, used its dying breath to tell me I made it happy. You make me happy too, little bear, when you're not making me wet my pants. When I was a teen, I worked at a cable access studio and made mini-movies. My neighbors gave me their father's old video camera. They told me he never used it, but it didn't seem to work anymore and had a tape jammed in it. I fixed it up, and on the tape was hours of him driving around at night and filming people through their windows. There was nothing overly adult-rated on it, but there is something unsettling about seeing peeping Tom footage of a guy eating dinner with his family or over 20 minutes of some girls dancing around in their room. That is incredibly creepy, and I can't help but wonder if any of the footage was from the person from our first story. Probably not, but crazier internet coincidences have happened. I was watching scary movies and I got hungry, so I decided to go out for a late-night Taco Bell run. I lived alone at the time, so it was quite a shock as when I opened the door a hand was reaching in after me. I slammed the door on the offending arm and ran and grabbed a butcher knife. After closing all the blinds and sitting in the dark for an hour, I worked up the nerve to look outside. I was shocked to find a bunch of Chinese food menus for a new restaurant scattered all over the ground. My brother and I were probably about 7 and 5, respectively. We used to wake up every weekend and play computer games before my parents woke up. One day we turned on the computer and got an eerie message that was directed to us. It said, "Hello, Sam and James. This is your computer talking, and I am alive. Do not run and tell your parents. They cannot help you now." Turns out my dad had programmed the computer to say that upon starting. This was mid-90s. When I was about 7 to 8 years old, my family rented a house close to the beach for a week. The drive wasn't very long, but as an 8-year-old, by the time we got there, I really had to feed the porcelain stallion a brown bone. We pulled into the driveway and are met by a middle-aged woman who owned the house and showed us the place and told us about the town and what to do. My first instinct is to find the bathroom, so I ask and she tells me it's the second door on the right after the kitchen. Go inside and open the bathroom door to an older guy just standing there looking at me. I kinda duck my head down, say sorry, and went back outside. They noticed I was back pretty fast and I told them there was someone in the bathroom already. That's when it got weird. The lady looked at me confused and said there's no one else in the house. I explained that I definitely saw someone in the bathroom, and after searching the house we find no evidence of anyone else being in there. After a while, the lady told us her dad owned the house and lived there and recently passed away. She inherited the house and wasn't sure what to do with it, so she'd started renting it out. I'm pretty sure I saw her dad. This is the story of how a creepy encounter with a scary man at a harbor cafe saved me from something even more terrifying. It was in the autumn of 1994, and I was 19 years old. At the time, my dad had been working for almost 6 months abroad, and I was planning a surprise visit. My dad and I have always been close. I'm an only child, and my mother passed away from cancer when I was still a baby. So it was just my dad and I, a really tiny little family. But he made up for it by being the most awesome parent ever. Now that I wasn't a little kid anymore, I appreciated that more and more. I had booked the ticket and was ready to go. It was going to be great fun to surprise him with a visit. I had to take the ferry though and had just gotten my driving license and felt really unhappy about having to drive my little car on board the ferry and decided not to bring the car at all and just rent one once I got there. Having time to spend, I decided to have coffee at a nearby cafe, since I was early and they hadn't started telling people to go onto the ferry just yet. At the cafe, there were lots of truck drivers and I soon realized I was the only woman there. One man, a 40-ish bloke with ice blue eyes and tattoos all over him, was eyeing me from across the room. Something about him made my skin crawl. I got up to leave, feeling suddenly very uncomfortable, and to my utter horror, he followed. What do I do now? I asked myself. This was before everyone owned a cell phone, I might add. I decided to try and look busy and maybe he'd leave me alone. So I pulled out my ticket and tried to look like I was reading it carefully when he suddenly snatched it from my hand and said, "I'm on the same boat. I'll have hours of your company then. How lovely." In a voice that was an absurd combination of jovial flattery and hidden hostility. I felt very strongly that if I got on the boat with this man who now knew my booking details, I'd be in grave danger. I can't explain why the feeling was so overwhelming, but it was, and I decided then and there not to get on the boat. The ticket had been cheap anyway, I could get on the next one instead. I hid in the ladies' room until I knew the ferry had left, and then I went to rebook my ticket. The story could have ended there, a creepy encounter with a stalkerish man, but it doesn't. I was right in the assumption that getting on that ferry would have been unbelievably dangerous. Have you figured out the date yet? The date was September 28, 1994, and the name of the ship was the MS Estonia. And that cold night, she sank in the Baltic Sea, taking 852 people with her, resulting in the worst ferry catastrophe to strike Sweden to this day. I still recall that day with horror and wonder what would have happened if this creepy man had not taken an interest in me. If I'd not listened to my instinct and gotten on board, instead of waiting for the next boat. Would I have been among the survivors? Or would my dad have seen my name on the list of lives lost in the Baltic Sea? I worked at a movie theater selling concessions, and this older man approaches the counter and orders. I ask him, "Would you like anything else?" And he looks at me and says, "Every time I ask for the thing I want, they keep telling me it's illegal." I'm quite creeped out by this guy, so I just sort of chuckle and then he proceeds to ask me, "Do you want to know what I ask?" Working in concessions, part of the job is making the moviegoers feel welcome, so I say, "Sure." And then what he says to me was the most disturbing thing I've ever heard. He says, "You wouldn't have any young girls in the back over there locked up for me," he said as he's pointing to the closet. He then continued, "Because that's all I really want, a young girl. I mean, I wish I could just bring them back here and you'd keep them locked up so I could just pick them up whenever I wanted. You know?" At this point, a line had already started forming up behind him and he'd still not paid yet, so I told him the total of his order and then he asked me, "You understand, right?" And I didn't know what to say, so I just chuckled and agreed. Then he pulled out a $10 bill and said, "I like you," and put it into the tip jar and walked away. Ugh. Not to me, but to my sister. She and her first husband had just had their first child a few months prior. My brother-in-law was working the graveyard shift at his job as my sister stayed home taking care of my nephew. Around 2 a.m. she heard loud knocking on her back door. She went to go check it out and saw a lady banging on the door asking for my sister to let her in. The lady told my sister that her husband had just beaten her down the street and was looking for her. My sister was hesitant to let her in since she had a newborn in the house and didn't want to interfere. She told the lady that the best she could do was call the police for her. The lady told my sister to not call the police and to let her in. This is where my sister got suspicious. She went to get her phone and called 911. When she went to the back door, the lady was gone. The police arrived a few minutes later and they told my sister that the same situation happened a few streets down. Apparently, the couple would do this act to get into people's homes. I'm sure this is very common, but having it almost happen to my sister and nephew just creeps me out. Some real Clockwork Orange crap. Thank God for your instincts on that one. The gormless narrator who can't say no to people would probably have let her in no matter how worried he was. Cop here. I've posted this story before, so it might sound familiar. I was dispatched to a house at about 1 a.m. for a prowler. We get there and talk to the residents. Long story short, they saw two people wearing masks, one Jason-style hockey mask and I don't remember the other. They'd seen them in the yard across the street. It was about 2 weeks past Halloween, so it seemed believable. We check the area and don't see anything. 10 to 8. It's worth noting the residents don't seem drunk or high or crazy at all. A few times you'll get a similar call and get there to find the resident is strung out on crystal and seeing things. However, back to the story. An hour later we get called back. This time we have our dispatcher on the phone with them while we're surrounding the area. We, about 5 of us, are in a perfect position and dispatch tells us they can see the prowlers in the next yard. We start to move in. Dispatch says the residents saw the two prowlers wave and move into the shed. Guess where I am? That's right, next to the shed. I give verbal commands, bang on the door, and nothing. Screw it, fine. I'll come in after you. Doors open, and empty. I even think to check for a trap door. Nothing. It's raised about 4 inches, so there isn't even a possibility of a door leading out. Again, check the area and find nothing. I talk to the residents. They said as I was moving in on the shed, the two put their fingers to their lips, giving the shush sign, and then they both waved. They moved into the shed as I was next to it. We went over every possibility trying to come up with an explanation. If the caller was just messing with us, they had no prior history of it, as in repeated calls for service at the address. I'm not much of a believer in paranormal stuff, but I can still appreciate a situation where I can't logically explain what just happened. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One night about 10 months ago, there was a pretty heavy snowstorm in my area. All of the roads were closed and a curfew was issued for everyone except emergency medical personnel. I'd been shoveling snow for most of the day and was dead tired come nightfall. Didn't have energy to do much of anything besides eat dinner and lay down. I fire up some OG Star Trek and begin to doze off. A couple of hours later, around 1 a.m., I hear the sound of a door rattling and a slight whisper saying my name. I sit up a bit and realize it's coming from my parents' room, becoming fainter with the passing time. After 10 minutes or so, I gather up the courage to see what the heck is going on. Crappy folding knife in hand, I peek out into the hallway and I don't see anything. The noise is still coming from the room next door, the rattling becoming more rushed as I approach. Cautiously, I open the door and sneak inside. It's pitch black and I can't see anything. My eyes are taking entirely too long to adjust to the darkness. I'm shuffling forward and all of a sudden, something grabs and pulls on my leg. At this point, I was so freaked out I jumped back. As the whispers continued, I recognized my dad's voice. He was asking me for help. He had a stroke while walking to use the bathroom around 1 a.m. that night. After he fell, he was able to use his left foot to rattle a door to his bathroom. My mum fell asleep on the couch in the living room and wasn't around to help or hear. I was able to grab the house phone and call 911, and despite the weather, the police and an ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. That was the scariest night of my life. The doctors told us there wasn't much hope for my dad before going into surgery since he had had a hemorrhagic stroke and there was a massive amount of internal bleeding. Fast forward 10 months and my old man is cognitively the same, just paralyzed on his right side. He had every infection under the sun while in hospital, but he staved them off and is still with us today. He was my best friend before the incident and my hero after. In conclusion, heard some rattling and whispers, freaked out, found my dad lying on the ground after a massive stroke. I was visiting my hometown and decided to pick up my old high school friend from his house and take him to dinner and a drink to catch up. He's kind of stressed and tells me that his ex, with whom he'd broken up with over 2 years prior, has been stalking him and harassing him. I drove him home afterwards and it starts to drizzle. As I drop him off at his house, the neighborhood was dark and quiet by now, we both notice a bag tied to my side view mirror. It was likely attached when we were at the restaurant. We open it to see a poorly taken photo of a tree taken at night with a flash. There was a brief letter, obviously written from his ex, that said, "I buried our first love letter under this tree 3 years ago. This tree is growing from our love." I made sure my friend got into his house all right and got the heck out of there. When I was 16 in the mid-90s, aka the "I know everything, I'm invincible and you can't stop me" age, I got in a fight with an acquaintance while a whole bunch of us were hanging out at his house. Stupid fight, can't remember what it was about, but decided, screw it, I was going home. I lived about 5 miles away, but I didn't have a car, and since it was 2 a.m., there were no buses. I was going to walk home. In the middle of the night, through a not as safe as it seems neighborhood as a tiny 16-year-old girl. So I did. I think in hindsight, my friends either didn't believe I was going to do it or were too startled by the sudden argument to realize what I was doing. I left the house and started hoofing it. About a mile out, the suburban housing neighborhood melted into a main street with highway access. I started to notice a grayish minivan following me. It would follow me, pass me, turn a corner, and about 3 blocks later, it would do the same thing. I mean, really obvious what it was doing. I crossed over to the other side of the street, so I was walking the opposite of the traffic flow, and thus no car could come up behind me. I kept doing it on the other side of the street. About a mile later, there was a 24-hour Fred Meyer, West Coast USA chain grocery and all-purpose night store. Its lights were bright, but parking lot empty-ish. I immediately crossed the parking lot and went to head inside. Just before I got to the doors, the minivan that had been following me pulled up into one of the parking spots. A guy called out from the driver's side and said, "I don't want you to walk over here, just stay there and listen. I just wanted to let you know what I was doing. I saw you walking a while back, but I also saw a dark car that was following you. A couple of times you went to turn around or stopped, so it started following you down a parallel side street. When I saw it, I started to follow you both just to make sure you were safe. Go inside the store and call someone to pick you up, please. I haven't seen the car since you headed across the lot." He waited until I was inside the store and then pulled away. I didn't have anyone to call, so I just let the night cashier know what was going on, and I hung out with her for about an hour and a half. Then I finished the walk home. I've never forgotten the incident or that man, whoever he was. During the walk, I never saw the dark car he mentioned, but I've always been convinced he saved my life that night. I like to think that in this scary night there was a comical situation of the van driver and the dark car driver seeing each other, thinking the other car was shady, and being equally protective about the kid in question, until the dark car driver lost track of them. Not as scary as the others, but it creeped me out nonetheless. I was out of town on business, and my security camera went off in the middle of the night. I checked it and I saw a blurry white light moving erratically in my room. Now, I'm half asleep in the hotel hundreds of miles away from home, and I don't believe in ghosts, so my first thought was that someone was shining a flashlight into the house to case it. Not knowing what else to do and not wanting to call the police and look foolish, I used the two-way sound on the camera to yell, "Get the F away from my house, I'm calling the police!" The moving light didn't seem to react to that, so I just sat there, in my hotel room, watching it until it stopped. The next night it happened again. And the next. I've shown the footage to my colleagues and they're convinced I have a ghost. I asked the pet sitter to look around the house for prints in the snow and they found nothing. I finally got home and nothing is out of place, but now I realize that I have to sleep in this house with the weird moving light. So when the sun went down, I was desperately trying to figure out what it was. 2 days later, I did. This is kind of hard to explain, but bear with me. This was a very bad winter, and I'd taken the internet's advice and thrown pantyhose filled with rock salt up into my gutters to prevent ice dams. The string hanging down from one of them had an ice crystal in it, so that little ice crystal was blowing in the breeze and reflecting the driveway lights back into the house. So, absolutely not creepy at all, but when you're away from home and see a floating orb in your house, it will give you the willies for sure. Back when I worked night shift as a security guard, I'd experienced mild hallucinations due to my poor sleep schedule. I was doing my patrol and I was feeling particularly out of it, so I kept getting those flashes of movement in the corner of my eye. But I was convinced it was just my brain messing up. At the site I was working, there's a large warehouse filled with chemical waste that has only one light on in it. As I'm going along, I see a pale shape on the ground and quickly recognize it as a body. My adrenaline spikes and I nearly pass out. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a CPR dummy the workers left out for training. I was sitting in our office room home alone when I was 19. I was typing a paper for one of my college classes. The office room used to be my sister's room before she moved out, so a lot of her decorations are still there. She had a photo of a mountain range, an oval-shaped mirror, and 3 different hangings that read Faith, Hope, and Love. This makes 5 total things hanging on the wall in the room. Suddenly I got random chills, which happens all the time, it was pretty cold there. But this time, as soon as I got the chills, everything in the room hanging on the walls fell off simultaneously. This really freaked me out, but it got a tiny bit worse. I got up and walked out of the room only to notice everything hanging on a wall in my house had fallen, besides the television in my room. All the pictures in the living room and the other rooms, all of the trophies in my room from Little League sports, and even a stand that held candles. I wasn't sure what to do. I picked up all the stuff and hung it back up, which actually took me around 15 to 20 minutes. Then I drove to campus to finish my paper. Never told my parents. It's also worth mentioning this happened around noon on a sunny day 3 winters ago. On our way to a camping trip, I passed by an old painted-up car with decorations of Muppets and stuff on it. Obviously owned by a crazy person who couldn't drive over 50 miles per hour. Without stopping, we then passed the same car 40 minutes later. I work for an engineering college and frequently have to go up to the industrial floor to find old projects and materials that had been stored years ago. This is the floor with the HVAC unit, steam pipes and stuff, and is not very well lit in the evening. The year before I'd started working there, it was discovered that a homeless man had broken in and had been living up there. The cops had to be called because he had some kind of mental instability and kept coming back. Fast forward 2 years later and I'm up there looking for some pressure gauges when I see one of the fluorescent lights begin to flicker. My attention is drawn to that area, where I see the silhouettes of a body laying on the floor in the most uncomfortable position, and another one crouched in the corner against the wall. I nearly crapped my pants before booking it in the other direction, but then the light came back on and I saw it was 2 test dummies that the mechanical engineers must have stored there recently. I keep a length of pipe with me every time I go up there now. What is the weirdest conversation a waiter overheard while serving a table? One day I was cleaning tables on the patio when I noticed these 2 men had spread cheap Parmesan cheese all over their table. I went over and asked very sweetly if I could clear it off for them. They shifted awkwardly and one of them asks, "This is for mosquito." "No, this is cheese." They turn to each other and yell in unison, "It is cheese." Turns out they were Danish and very nice, just confused. Last night was pizza and trivia night at the restaurant I serve at. I'm helping a couple in their mid to late 50s with pop culture questions, against restaurant policy. We were all laughing and having a great time when the wife leans over to her husband and says, "She's so cute, can I ask her to come home with us?" While I'm standing right there. I laughed it off and got a $40 tip on a $60 check, and their phone number. To keep those inquiring minds informed, no, I did not call them back. It's just not my thing. I'm in a committed relationship with a wonderful man, and jeopardizing what we have for $40 is dumb. They're regulars of mine, so Wednesdays should be interesting now. The wife was the really pushy one, too. Also, not Brad and Angelina. I overheard a man proposing a swinger lifestyle to his wife. She didn't like it one bit. And there I come to bring them their drinks in the middle of the conversation. "I can't believe you're going to lose your virginity tonight," said at a family table. I like to think they were all quick-witted and messing with me. "Maybe she just got married?" 2 adults, 2 kids, and the father said it. I really hope they were messing with me. I don't really remember the name used, but it went like this. "What's Jennifer up to?" "Oh, she's probably effing my husband." This was at a table of 5 women who looked to be in their 60s. The Golden Girls just don't give an F. I was closing late one night and had a couple of really high teenagers come in. They could barely sit up in the booth and ordered $80 worth of food for 2 people. One of the guys ordered an iced tea and asked for Splenda with it. I brought out his drink and set it on the table along with the sugar caddy. This kid just stared at it for a minute and then asked which packet was Splenda. I told him it was the yellow one. "Oh, what color is yellow?" he finally asked. I pulled a packet out of the caddy and handed it to him and walked away. I couldn't hold my laughter in anymore. As I was walking away, he turned to his friend and asked, "Can she tell how high I am?" They tipped me a quarter. I wonder if that means they tipped 25 cents or 25%. Honestly, it can go either way with people on Green Herb. More awkward and sad than weird, but it was a conversation between a man and his 10-year-old son. The man was berating his son over his golf game. I work at a country club, so this isn't exactly unheard of, but the dad was being super intense with his criticism. He was calling his son a quitter for wanting to stop playing, and telling him that if he quit now, he'd always quit everything in life. The kid sat there and listened numbly for about 10 minutes before I came over to refill their waters, and my presence causes the dad to pause in his speech. As I'm walking away, the kid says, "Evan doesn't make me play golf. He tells me to do what I think is good for me." The next time I'm on the floor, I see the dad is just heartbroken. I ask a coworker who had been there a few years what the situation is. Apparently the man and his wife were divorced and his wife remarried. He had his son on weekends and they'd golf together. The kid was apparently pretty good, but had developed other interests. I could be way off, but I see it as a father who was trying to connect with his son but being a bit heavy-handed at it. The thing that gets me is that the guy doesn't come in with his son anymore. He comes in alone and drinks a lot at our bar. He doesn't say so much. My stomach drops every time I see him. I make an effort to go over and see how he's doing, even if it isn't my station for the night. I'll ask him how his work is going since that's the only thing he's forthcoming about. He'll give me a brief summary, I'll listen and nod my head. There was a month or 2 where he came in with a very friendly woman, but that was a while back. I just want to hug the guy and give him some advice about his son, but I don't want to make it awkward. While I was working at a Jose's crustacean hut, I was serving a well-dressed, seemingly happy couple. They ordered a steam pot for 2 and a side of fries to share. Right after I drop off the food, before I'm even out of earshot, the husband confesses to having been cheating and that he wants a divorce. She starts bawling her eyes out to the point she's doing the whole gasping for air between sobs thing. And my manager immediately rushes over to try and see if it was something she could fix because a full restaurant on a Saturday night is not the place for a screaming, sobbing woman. In the end, the couple stayed for 3 hours, didn't touch any of the food, and just had me throw it all out. Very weird day. Is Jose's Crustacean Hut a bad fake name for Joe's Crab Shack? I am so ashamed that I accepted she worked for a chain called Jose's Crustacean Hut without thinking twice. I used to work at a bakery, bistro type of place, and one time there was this table of 4 or 5 brunchy ladies talking quietly to each other. I overheard one of them say something about a multi-party bedroom adventure, and another responded also about this same encounter. I walked past their table again to try and overhear more, and realized they were talking about 4G, not an org. Well, you get the picture. Years ago, I was working in Pizza Hut in a not-so-great neighborhood outside of Atlanta. I was bringing a pizza to a table where I heard 2 kids who were no older than 7 in the middle of this conversation. Kid A said, "You best step down, B-word." Kid B said, "Try me. See you at Crossroads," and Kid A pointed his fingers like a gun at the other one. "No, see you at the Crossroads, mother effer." Then I asked them to sit down so I could serve the pizza. About 6 years ago, I was working at an Italian restaurant in California. A couple came in for lunch and ordered 2 iced teas and a 3-course special. Appetizer, entree, and dessert each. Maybe $25 total, the portions were smaller. After they down it, in about 25 minutes, the guy gets down on one knee and proposes to the lady. Keep in mind, this is like 11:45 on a Tuesday. She covers her face and the guy spends 20 minutes on one knee trying to convince her to say yes. It was the most uncomfortable thing that's ever happened to me. I had to go and drop off the check while the guy was still on his knee because he called me over. Anyway, they leave and come back in 2 months later and engaged, so it worked out, I guess. I was a waiter at a wedding once, and as I was serving the main course, I came up to a table where 2 guys were being introduced. The first one says to the second, "So, you swing, right?" The second guy says, "Yeah, you're with Kirsty, right? I effed her brains out while you were away for work." Guy number 1 shakes his head and says, "Thanks for looking after her so well," or something as I was walking away. I saw them later getting on like a house on fire. I wonder if the author means that these guys were just becoming really good friends or whether things were getting hot and heavy. Although I guess swingers aren't bisexual by default, so I guess I'll never know. I work in a local greasy spoon. There was a young couple in maybe their early 20s eating breakfast. At one point, the girl dumps a pharmacy's worth of pills on the table and starts sorting and counting them out. When I walked by to check on them, she started acting super paranoid, and as I walked away, I heard her say to the guy, "Maybe we shouldn't be doing this here. There's cameras." And she proceeded to move all of the pills back into her bag and they left. Got a really nice tip though. Something more humorous, I had a man in his 60s come in for lunch by himself. He was reading a book and I recognized the title. It was Fingersmith, which is a steampunk lesbian romance novel. Got a good laugh from that. I work as a cook in the most popular Thursday night bar at my school, but I also have a window for customers to order from and I chat with them quite a bit. Needless to say, almost all conversations verge on the side of weird. However, some take the cake. My favorite was 3 girls who came up to us to get some French fries, and while they were being made, they started to chat, mostly about boys. As the fries were being cooked, they included me in the conversation and tried to get my opinion on how to find the right guy and which guy they knew was the hottest. As the conversation progressed, one admitted that the only guy she wanted to F was one of the other girl's brothers. This became the facet of the discussion as she began to drunkenly go into details about how hot he was, why he was so hot, and why she wanted to F him. Meanwhile, the second girl stood there awkwardly with a look of shame on her face while her brother's attractive qualities were dissected by her 2 best friends. While not the weirdest story I have, it's definitely one that sticks in my brain. As an older brother, I really hope that if my sister was ever in this spot, she'd do the right thing and hook me up. I overheard, "I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think I'd save so much money if I just ate one big meal a day." Yeah, but you're gonna get hungry later. Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm pretty sure they were high. This sounds like a conversation between the residents in Animal Crossing. Oh, that explains it. Shep is always high as crap, dude. I was working as a pizza delivery driver. Technically, that's waiting, right? And I pulled up to this house. Inside, you could hear 2 people arguing about something, and the woman yells, "F you, I'm gonna go and screw the next guy who says hello to me." She answers the door and I said, "Hello, here's your pizza." I unfortunately didn't do the deed with her, but she gave me a $20 tip, which was nice. We had a guy bring in his wife so he could tell her he wanted a divorce without her causing a scene because they were in public. When I went over to take their order, knowing full well how awkward this was, he said to her, "I'm honestly not that hungry. Do you want to split a sandwich?" To which she replied, "No, I don't want to split a fricking sandwich. You just said you wanted a divorce." And then they left. She had taken her heels off and was walking on the opposite side of the road. I once had a pimp try to encourage me to join his ring. This happened the other day at my restaurant. Not really weird, just a hilarious dad moment. The young kid said, "I heard today that one of the members of One Direction left the band." The dad said, "Does that now make them 2 Directions?" Classic dad joke right there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I noticed a kid from my school was sitting in a booth at the other side of the restaurant. I offered to trade sides with the other busser so I could go and say hi and such. The kid, by the way, is openly gay and very flamboyant at school. I started walking up and I heard his dad talking about how proud he was that his son just got a girlfriend. The kid noticed me and looked pretty embarrassed. I feel pretty bad for him, and I hope his family is accepting of him no matter what if he eventually does tell them. I was serving two middle-aged ladies at a suburban Applebee's. I think they each had one drink at most. They're having a great time, clearly catching up. As I gather the plates after their meal, the woman motions me closer and whispers, "We're all made of stars." And she really did draw out that last word. I think she must have been on some sort of medication. Totally unexpected. A woman told me she'd just had a hysterectomy. I didn't know what to say. The only thing I could think of was, "Congratulations?" I mean, I wouldn't just go whoring yourself out. Yes, but it's glamorous. Absolutely serious conversation heard on the patio between four married women. I don't even know what was meant by what they said, and I'm still trying to figure it out. This woman ordered her food before her friends were there. Her friends came in 20 minutes later and ordered. She proceeded to demand free food because all of their food didn't come out at the same time. She gave my coworker, a 5-year vet at this restaurant with rave reviews, the hardest time ever. She was extremely rude. It was a birthday gathering. I overheard her saying she wasn't going to tip my coworker because the food she ordered was too expensive. When the other servers heard about what she said about the tip, we said, "All right, there's no tip anyway, so let's make it worth it." We went out to sing happy birthday. Her free ice cream was served, one scoop half melted in a bowl. We clapped out of time, all started the song at different times, and no one smiled. Most liberating night of my life. We rarely ever do stuff like that, so it was so worth it. This brings joy to this former waiter's heart. There are so many people I would have liked to pull crap like this on. Bless those of you with the courage to do it. I have 2 stories that I've been dying to tell. I work in a 4-star restaurant. I had a man come in for dinner, sweating bullets from the time he sat down. He and the lady were obviously a couple, and the entire staff guessed what would happen, especially after he ordered a $300 bottle of champagne to start the meal. She looked happy, but worried through the entire meal. When the dessert came, he got down on one knee and I heard her say, "Please don't." Those 2 words stopped my heart. I can't imagine what this poor guy was going through. They had a hushed conversation and she ran out, literally ran, while he sat there holding an open ring box. He finished the bottle of wine they'd ordered during dinner and, pretty wasted, turned to me and said, "Why won't she let me love her?" Just like that. Like I'm going to give him some kind of answer to explain the complex and painful thing that's just happened. I told him that sometimes we fall in love with the wrong people, and the only people worth anyone's time are the ones who give back what they get. He finished the bottle, paid his tab, and slowly walked to the parking garage. I never saw him again. I also used to wait tables at a Bob Evans that was located across the street from a nursing home. Whoever chose that location was a genius, because old people love the crap out of Bob Evans. I had an elderly couple who came in every day for lunch and ordered the same thing. It got to the point that they would have their meal on the table by the time I saw them crossing the street from the window. They usually only got applesauce and banana bread or mashed potatoes. One time the old man came in alone after a week of absence. He never said it, but I knew she had passed away. He still ordered for her and let the food sit on her side of the table, every day. I cried more than one time delivering it. I hope one day my future husband loves me that much. Before anyone asks, yes, this story really did happen to me. I'm a cook, really a chef, but I don't like the term, but one of my servers came back to the kitchen with a 1,000-yard stare on her face. I asked her what's wrong and she just says, 41, meaning booth 41. 41 is 2 tables from the kitchen. So I act like I'm making my rounds in the dining room and I get near 41. It's 2 nice mid-40s looking people dressed in business casual from what I can tell. The woman is drunk or high or both and passed out with a biscuit in her beer and smells like pee. A plate full of our most expensive dinner in front of her untouched. The guy with her smells like he crapped his pants and has never bathed. Mind you, they're clean-cut looking people. He's happily chewing away mouth open on crab legs, mashed potatoes and steak. He's slamming his beer and chomping away. I just give a smile and nod and keep on walking. I make it near the bathrooms, turn around and just watch them. He proceeds to poke her with a crab leg and says, "Can I have your butt when we get out of here?" She drunkenly mumbles what sounds like, "The fish and ferry won't fit up my butt." I looked behind me towards the kitchen and all of my cooks and quite a few servers are piled around the guard station, just holding back laughter and looking at me. I look at them and say I have no fricking idea what to do here. About 10 minutes later, he finishes his food. She wakes up, downs her beer with biscuit in it. They pay their tab with a 20% tip. I had to close that corner of the restaurant for the rest of the night because the fricking smell wouldn't leave that area from them. I even took the booth seats out back as soon as they left. Their stink somehow soaked into the wood of the booth and lingered in my restaurant well past closing time. I made my cooks stand around the booth and smoke after closing, in hopes that the cigarette smoke would smell better than they did. Hearing a woman talk about how bad her hoo-ha smelled at an Applebee's trumps any other conversation ever. I wait tables in an assisted living home, an old folks' home, and have one table filled with men with dementia that have the same one or two conversations every day. First they introduce themselves, then they either talk about how one of them had a cousin who was his age and was more or less a brother to them, or about how the union saved everything. We used to work for $1 a day, and it was hard work too. We'd still be doing it today if it weren't for the union, and if you didn't join, you were called a scab and they'd burn down your house or car. Those were the days. I've waited Chinese food for 5 years now. At the first restaurant I worked at, I heard a table of old women talking about how one of them was going to kill their husbands and what she was going to do with the insurance money. I stopped by to fill waters and asked what the talk of the day was. Weather, according to them. In hindsight, I should have said something, but I was 15 and scared shirtless. Most recently, a guy in his early 20s was having lunch with his grandparents, and as I go to drop off the check, he gets all upset and says to the grandma, "I shower 3 times a week now, jeez." The same day at the bar, I heard a girl end her story with, "And that's how I learned what midget tossing was." My favorite was a few years ago, and it was a brother and sister in their 70s. I'd waited on them before. They always sit in the same spot, away from people and near the kitchen. I come out of the kitchen and turn the corner, and the lady is giving her brother the bird, screaming, "Frick you, Morty, I should have smothered you when I had the chance." I mean, that just sounds like another day in sibling town, to be honest. I know very close families who have no filter around each other, and it's glorious. I was working late night on a slow Thursday at the local pizza shop as a driver. Man comes in to look at the menu board and asked me if his wife could use our bathroom. The place was takeout and delivery only, so we didn't have public bathrooms. I got the okay from my manager, and the guy motioned through the window for her to come in. The manager shows her to the back, and the guy says he doesn't see anything they want, so he's going to wait in the car. When my manager comes out, she says the woman is not okay and is incoherent. When we looked out of the window, the guy was hauling tail out of the lot. He had picked up a mentally challenged girl, entertained her for the evening, and then dropped her off. We called the cops and they took her to a shelter. Creepy and sad. I once overheard a mother tell her 12-year-old daughter, I'm guessing on the age but she looked fairly young, that she was not planned. I walked by just in time to hear her say, "Oh, don't worry, honey. Even though you're an accident, you're a well-loved accident." The girl looked at her mum with the saddest look on her face and burst into tears. I work as a host. Last night I had a middle-aged couple come in. I ask if it will be for 2, and the gentleman tells me they need a table for 3. The woman he's with immediately shoots him a confused look. I ask for the name of the guest joining them so we can show her to the table later. He says, Christine. She takes a deep sigh and says, "Really? She's coming?" To which he replies, "Well, she was invited," in a tone that suggests he wasn't a big fan of Christine either. Fast forward 15 minutes, and a nice middle-aged woman comes up to the host stand and says she's looking for her husband and his co-worker. Of course, she tells me she's Christine. Not a single one of them looked comfortable for that entire dinner. I'm a current indebted servant of Olive Garden. Some of the weirdest conversations I hear are about myself. "She's so young. Do you think she has kids to support? Why isn't she in school right now? I mean, it's Olive Garden and not an adult club. She has to be wearing colored contacts. Green eyes aren't real." I get elderly men who tell me they're lonely and ask if I will take them home just for the night. One man told me it was his 94th birthday, and when I asked if there was anything special I could do for him, he said, "Yeah, you can sit on my face." I almost got fired that day. I get really entitled high school girls who try to quietly talk crap about me being just a waitress and a total loser in life all the time. But the all-time weirdest was when I walked up to 2 high, and I mean completely toasted college students discussing aliens. "They could be one of us. How do you think we can do organ transplants? That's not natural. We can't grow organs, so where do we get them?" Illegal aliens, man. They land here, but they're just like us. So we take their livers. What is the weirdest thing you found at the bottom of an elevator shaft? I once accidentally lost my driver's license down the little gap in the elevator doors. I just dropped it and was super unlucky as it slipped through. It turned up in my mail 10 years later. Obviously long expired, but still crazy that some maintenance guy found it and bothered returning it. Pest control tech here. Snakes had gotten into the pit and were climbing up and dropping down on people as they rode the elevator. Good times. Snakes on an Elevator, the sequel to the Samuel L. Jackson movie. Worked at a hotel, guests dropped their phone down the shaft. After a few failed retrieval efforts, we called the elevator guys. They went down and got the phone and also found a carton of eggs. Rotten, but not cracked. I don't even understand how that could happen, actually. Because it was no accident. I work in tech now, but while I was in college, I helped an HVAC guy, and he had once had me put a carton of fresh eggs in the duct of a client's office that had stiffed him before. When I asked him why he was doing this, he said, "If this mother effer doesn't pay up, he's going to have a new issue." But then the guy paid 2 days later, and I was sent to retrieve the eggs. He called it his 99-cent insurance policy. We found well over 1,500 tax returns at the bottom of the ATO's North Brisbane office elevator shaft. Oh my frickin' god, I know who dropped those. Like, exactly who. A person I know told us a story about how they used to work in the ATO Brisbane office, and if anything came across their desk that was too hard, it was dropped into the bottom of the elevator shaft. We were only talking about it the other night, having a giggle about what would happen if they were ever found. They giggled, saying a crap load of files went missing in that shaft. This was way back in the day, like 25 plus years ago, before computers and well before the internet. If something needed to be sent out, they'd have to fill in a form by hand, and then that was typed up by another person on a typewriter and then sent out in a letter. So it was easy to make paperwork disappear. I feel like 1,500 individual tax returns for a company would account for an awful lot of money. The author who replied to that must feel pretty confident nobody will care enough anymore. My dad was an elevator mechanic for about 15 years. He had a very dark sense of humor and would come home with some of the craziest stories. For example, anytime he was in an elevator, he would shake it a little or tap on the displays or buttons and go, "Yep, total piece of crap, inferior piece of crap." And I think he mostly just did it to freak people out. One of my favorites, he got a call that someone was hearing weird noises from the elevator. He got inside and rode the elevator up, and sure enough, he could hear it too. For half a second, he thought it was a baby crying and realized it was a cat. When he got to a certain floor, he could hear this sad meowing. It obviously wasn't in the elevator car, so he got into the shaft and found this little orange kitty. It had somehow, and I don't think he figured it out or told us, got into the elevator shaft and was sitting in a spot between floors where it wouldn't get crushed by the elevator, but it couldn't get out. My dad saved it and gave it to the building manager to see if it belonged to anyone in the building. It was the one time he ever told us a story that involved him saving an animal instead of finding dead ones. Cats are made of liquid, I'm pretty serious about that. They have a lot of floof and fit through cracks and crevices much smaller than you think should be possible. My dad supervises elevator mechanics, and one of them called him from a mental hospital and said, "You've got to see this." The maintenance guy was called because the elevator wasn't quite sitting level on the ground floor. It was about half an inch too high, and both patients and staff had been tripping on it. But all other floors were no problem. My dad arrived to find the maintenance guy cackling and looking into the bottom of the shaft. There were probably tens of thousands of magazines down there. They had to get a bunch of shovels, a small crew, and a rolling dumpster to clear it out. When it was all done, my dad decided to stay behind and pretend to read a newspaper while he sat in the lobby. After about half an hour, he sees an elderly patient holding a magazine, shuffling slowly toward the elevator. He stops in front of the doors, glances left, glances right, and quickly stoops down and slides the magazine into the gap, and shovels away as fast as he can with a huge grin on his face. My dad couldn't help but laugh hysterically. This guy had probably been sliding magazines in there multiple times per day, every day for decades. I should ask him whether he reported it or let the guy have his fun. It wouldn't surprise me if my dad went with the latter. As a psychiatrist, I've become fairly desensitized to weird patient actions, but I appreciate this story for how long this patient was doing this. Usually the passive-aggressive stuff goes away quickly, but this man sounds resilient as frick. Imagine what he could have done without getting served a bad genetic hand. Our medical team dropped a steel butthole dilator down the dumbwaiter shaft by mistake. When the technician came and grabbed it off the floor, I'll never forget the look on his face when I told him, "We need that up here, it's got to go in someone's butt soon." It was priceless. I'm a technician for a hospital dealing with rectal surgical tools. It's very normal. That poor dilator, it got away for a minute. Thought it was finally leaving that wretched life behind. Next thing it knows, it's lying at the bottom of a filthy dumbwaiter shaft. And just when it's starting to get used to that, thinking, not much of a view, but a lot roomier than I'm used to, along comes the elevator tech and it's back to the old day in, day out. It must have really done something bad in a previous life. I bet it was Roy Cohn. we found a couch. Not joking, it was a walk-in pit that a homeless person had retrofit into a small living room. One of my baseball coaches when I was a kid lost his glass eyeball in an elevator shaft. The maintenance guy gave him a solid "what the frick." One time we were doing a rip-out at an old factory. They were gutting them and turning them into luxury apartments. The elevator that we were taking out was a crappy old freight that hadn't run in years. When we finally ran it up, we went down to inspect the pit. It smelled like a dead body had chilled there for half a century. The bottom floor wasn't lit, so I shined my flashlight under the elevator, and the whole floor started moving. Roaches. Nasty. Haven't really found anything fun in my time. I've cleaned out more pits than I could count to. I gave my mum a cheap ring I found a pair of underwear at a hotel, and I found a full packet of transcribed documents at a courthouse. Oh, and I was on a mod once, and one of the hoistway doors had an advertisement sticker for a tennis restringing service, which was weird because it was somewhere only an elevator guy would be able to reach. I called the number, but it was out of service. I found some cool graffiti from the 40s. That's about it. I've worked on escalators for a year and a half. There was a lot more in those pits. I was taking home bent-up quarters every day. There were lots of shoe bits, and I was always nervous of coming across used needles in certain units. I do work at a large hotel. A few years ago, one of our elevators stopped working. Turned out when they opened it up, they found a 3-foot pile of guest folios that were never delivered to rooms. Later, when we looked on the camera, we found it was a security guard that got tired of delivering them to the rooms and instead dropped them down the elevator shaft. He did this for months until he was caught. As an elevator technician, this question should be my jam, but unfortunately I've never found anything interesting. A $2 coin once, a dime bag of some unknown substance, plenty of syringes, or sets of keys. It's mostly just people's junk mail and empty chip bags down there. I had a coworker who was opening a candy bar and dropped it down the shaft by accident. Hopefully the building's rats were able to enjoy it. I think those rats prefer the term elevator maintenance folk. The elevator guys in my dad's office complex found pieces of a dog's skeleton. Not the whole skeleton, just random parts. I wonder who was dropping poor Fido down the shaft piecemeal and from where. There was logistical effort involved in this very sad incident. I worked in hotel maintenance. A guest reported waterfall sounds in an elevator shaft en route to the lobby. An investigation ensued. A sump pump at the bottom of the shaft was running water constantly. Water is still coming out of the drain it's connected to after I unplug it. Find out from notes from third shift maintenance that multiple first-floor rooms had repeated clogged toilets all night long. The plumber called. A 6-inch sewer drain for the entire building is clogged. Worst clog I've ever seen in 15 years. Washcloths and TP. Over 7 inches of clog in the pipe. Apparently it was clogged so badly that it was backing up to the laundry room and the drain for the elevator shaft and the rooms closest to the main pipe out of the building. This was on the first-floor suites. There were solid turds at the bottom of that shaft after that event. I quit about a week later for unrelated circumstances. In conclusion, turds. I found keys and trash, bugs if the building is exceptionally crappy, mostly just dirt and rust. I found a paint roller that the last guy left there once. It was stuck to the floor. Not a whole lot of weird stuff can make it between the sill and the landing. Surprisingly, nothing too extreme. I'm an electrician, so we will find ourselves in a pit from time to time. Some ID badges, credit cards, coins. Once I found a red pen. It was out of ink, though. I worked security in a large department store. We routinely had to pop it open to retrieve dropped keys, wallets, and phones. Recovered a $2,500 gold necklace covered in poop. A would-be shoplifter darted out of our jewelry department and suitcased the necklace while in the elevator. When he realized we were waiting for him at the exit level, he went back up a floor, removed it, and dropped it down the shaft. We arrested him anyway, much to his surprise. Work for a major transit hub. We have our own trade departments. I'm in elevating. Weirdest things I've found are as follows. A Chucky doll head, 13 rubber duckies in one pit, syringes almost daily, and a silicone gimp mask. Every day is an adventure. At a place where my wife used to work, a body. There was a crash from the elevator area. The boss went to see what it was and came back white as a sheet and said, "Do not go in there." 2 maintenance guys had been working on the elevator, and one of them was in the bottom of the shaft and the other one made a small error. But I'm guessing the single most unusual item ever found at the bottom of an elevator shaft was a Wright R-2600 aircraft engine on July 28, 1945 in the Empire State Building. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work at an old 22-story building that had the first automated elevator system in our state. The idea was, in order to control the flow of people in the lobby, you'd push the button for your floor and the elevator would tell you which one to get in. The elevators would make sure the crowds spread out over the big lobby. Anyway, it was the first time I'd ever seen the auto-open eyes used, too. I worked on the executive floor where the long-winded executives would often stop me as I was leaving. I got used to passing my hand through the doors to break the eye and hold the doors open. You guessed it, my left hand didn't trip the eye. The doors closed on my hand, which were prevented from closing completely because of my heavy engagement and wedding rings. Crushed the whole mess and lost a 2-carat diamond 22 stories below. My hand was only bruised, thank goodness for a safety shutoff. I like to think that someday someone will find a tiny treasure. I'm not a technician, but I can tell you some dude at some point is going to find a Kindle at the bottom of a shaft in a Toronto hotel elevator. Rules to remember. Rule 1. Always check that you zipped your carry-on and didn't leave a gap in the bottom. Rule 2. Kindles fit through small carry-on bag zipper gaps and elevator shaft gaps. Not an elevator repair person, but you'd be shocked by the number of nurses that drop their keys down the shaft. 20 stories up and 2 buildings away from the parking garage, and they already had their keys in their hand. I had to call maintenance all the time for retrieval. I once dropped my keys stepping into an elevator and they landed on the gap, with one key bridging the gap and all the others hanging down. Let me tell you, I reached down and grabbed them most gingerly. I used to keep my work security pass and the card holder in my wallet. Once my friend bumped me as we were getting out of the lift and the same thing happened. It landed straight across the gap. All those years of playing Operation finally get to pay off sooner or later. I work as a phlebotomist in a hospital and had just drawn an elderly male patient. As I pushed my little cart into the elevator to go back down to the lab, his blood vials rolled off and both went right down the gap into the shaft. I felt so bad and immediately went back to tell him I had to redraw him. He was thrilled, said he was excited his blood would be down in the shaft for eternity. Such a funny guy. Retired after 40 years in the elevator maintenance trade. The best I ever found was a $20 bill, but I know a man that found a $7,000 diamond ring he kept for 6 months and no one ever asked about it. He gave it to his wife. Empty substance bags or used rubbers and needles, money or discarded lotto tickets. Usually the norm. If you're lucky, maybe an infestation of roaches sometimes. I'm reading a lot, and I mean a lot of people in the other comments who found purple adult toys. It's all in the same shaft, so to speak. Not elevator maintenance, but one time I dropped a set of wheels for a cart in the crack. I'm sure some maintenance man is going to be concerned to find loose wheels in the elevator of a nursing home, like some elderly person is walking around with a wheelless walker. I found a doll sitting upright in a corner, and a little bag of smack. I'm willing to bet a reasonable amount that if you took the substances, then you'd wake up in the middle of the night with that doll haunting your household. Not exactly an answer to the question, but still adjacent. When we came to a call about broken doors, we were not expecting that someone, for some unknown reasons, stole 1/2 of an elevator's doors. I found a whole salmon and a king crab in the same kitchen elevator of a seafood restaurant. $100 and $20 bills, and tons of syringes and rubbers. In 1988, the same bones were rediscovered when a new elevator shaft near the south parking lot on Elm Street was excavated. At that time, 11 skulls and 88 pounds of bones were found on one day, followed by 119 more pounds of bones. The Inquirer reported that they were being stored at the morgue. Cincinnati Music Hall, built on a children's home, built on a potter's field, built on a burial site, built on bulldozed indigenous mounds. I mean, that place is definitely not haunted, right? Holy crap, I've just asked a guy I knew who does this work last night. It wasn't surprising as I expected, just a ball, a very large ball, that had no business being able to get down there. Then I asked if he ever left anything strange down there for the next guy. He went quiet and slowly turned to me, pulling a Barbie out of his pocket. I found the Chamber of Secrets. You're a maintenance technician, Harry. Not in elevator repair. A few months ago, we had a floridly psychopathic patient. Think staring into space, can't form a coherent sentence, and a few other symptoms. He was brought into hospital. There was a fire alarm at an apartment building, and when the fire team went in, they somehow found this guy living in an elevator shaft. He had evidently been there for some period of time. Most of his delusions that he was talking about for me, that I could understand, were about time travel and Jesus. So we were joking a bit that he wasn't actually psychotic and was just time-traveling Jesus. It depends on the building and neighborhood. I've seen everything from dirty diapers to used needles, keys, wallets, phones, picture frames, sandwiches, and I guess the icing on the cake was a Tamagotchi. No, it didn't work, so we typically just trashed everything unless it was valuable. I always turned jewelry into the management's office, but I worked with guys who definitely sold valuables for unsavory purposes. In conclusion, that crack between the car and the door is a black hole for objects. The company where I worked had an old heavy-duty freight elevator that was semi-abandoned. It was more like an automotive lift with giant pistons embedded in the ground, but installed in an elevator shaft. When they needed to move something huge, they would fill the hydraulics with oil. It took hundreds of gallons of oil to top off the system, including the giant pistons, and then they would use it for a day. A few months later, they would try to use it again and find the oil gone. Once, they planned to use it the following day, so maintenance pumped in the oil to get ready. The next day, no oil. They refilled it the morning of the move and got one lift out of it before it stopped. The company knew it was spilling hydraulic oil into the ground under the plant and just didn't give a crap. They finally abandoned it for good when the maintenance guys threatened to report the illegal oil dumping. I had to clean some bad insulation at the top of the elevator chamber. So the maintenance guy brought the elevator to the top of the second floor and we got on top to reach up. On the elevator car were a few pairs of women's underwear and used rubbers. So someone was doing the deed on top of the elevator. How they got there was a mystery because it was a very modern one, and you need a special key to open the control box to access the top of the elevator. 100% this special key is the exact same key across thousands of elevators. Some jerk with a 3D printer, plaster, LED, and a high-resolution camera, i.e. a modern smartphone, can pretty accurately reproduce working keys from a photograph. Or you just buy the 5 most common keys on eBay for $15. In college, I pulled out my lanyard on which my Motorola Razr was sitting. My phone flew up in the air and dropped in the gap between the elevator and the floor. It dropped 4 floors. Maintenance was able to climb down there, and my phone barely had a scratch. My dad has been an elevator repairman for almost 30 years now. His best find to date was a $12,000 yellow diamond engagement ring. Tried for a while to find the owner, but eventually he got to keep it. Been in the game for 12 years now, found a full Christmas tree last month. Other finds are $5K and $20 notes, a big bag of substances, roughly 5 kilograms of brand new shoes by the boxload, and a severed finger. So backstory, the Christmas tree was found this year on a council estate in August. Photos were taken for the office as it was rather amusing. I visit this lift every month. The money and substances were found in the same lift around 3 months apart 7 years ago. The money was split between me and my engineer, as I was an apprentice at the time. The substances we handed into security. The shoes were found on a passenger staff lift out the back of JD Sports. We suspect a staff member was sticking them down there and loading them into a car at the end of his shift. Police were involved in this one. The finger was found in a very expensive apartment building. We're talking 50 floors and million-dollar apartments. Again, police and emergency medical services were involved in this one. Elevator repairman here. I haven't found anything crazy, just the normal stuff. Cockroaches, underwear, and a couple of bucks. But since you're reading this, I'll let you in on a little-known feature. Elevators have a tipping feature. If you slip money down between the sill into the pit, the elevator will get you to your floor faster. If you put in enough money, it will skip all other calls and bring you right to your floor. You're welcome. No, don't mind me down here. I found ID cards, keys, small dead animals, lizards and rats mostly, lots of cobwebs, needles, 1 AirPod, and things like that. The weirdest thing I've ever found as a repair guy is a clean pit. The service guys normally don't clean anything. I remember when I was maybe 10, I had a Nokia 3310, I believe, one of the brick ones anyway. I dropped it down the bottom of the elevator shaft in the small gap between the doors on the 6th or 7th floor. It was down there for months until I saw the elevator and maintenance man and asked if he could have a look. Not only was it still down there, unbroken, it still had battery life. Those were the days. I'm not an elevator maintenance person, but I have been in dozens of elevator shafts for work. I'm a bomb tech, and when I was in the army, I did a lot of POTUS and VIP missions in conjunction with the Secret Service. They don't have a bomb squad, so they steal us. It's a great gig, and you get to travel all over and stay in some insanely nice hotels. Anyway, the elevator shafts must be cleared to ensure there aren't any devices in there. Basically, any place that the POTUS or VIP will go needs to be checked out. I've done a fair amount of elevator surfing, which is riding on top of the car. The weirdest and funniest thing I've ever seen was a 12-inch Superman figurine that had its feet glued to the top of the elevator. The head was slightly tilted back and the arms were pointing upwards, so it appeared like Superman was flying up, up and away whenever the elevator was in use. I have a picture of it saved on an external hard drive somewhere. That crap was hilarious. What wedding moment made you think, ooh, they're not going to last long? She told me 2 days before that she found her fiancé annoying and that she didn't like him and that he was awful in bed. She was visibly, endlessly uncomfortable at the rehearsal, wedding, and dinner combo. Then she sobbed the entire morning day of. She ended up not getting any makeup done because she wouldn't stop scream-sobbing and refused to get dressed, stalling the wedding by like 35 minutes. Then she said 45 minutes of vows that she had prepared, 9 pages of things like inappropriate vows to friends, family, his parents and sisters, none of them to her husband, and then almost didn't say I do. Managed to get a, yeah, okay, yeah I do, out of her almost a full 60 seconds after she was supposed to say anything. I could go on for hours, but it was the most painful and awkward wedding I've ever been to. I've got my money on maybe 10 months. We're 1 month in. 2.5 month update, I've distanced myself from them completely. She's really clingy and likes to gossip about how awful her husband is, and I really don't have the time. She's also told me they're in couples therapy after I expressed negativity towards some extremely concerning things she said regarding their relationship and lack of communication. But I'm still betting on 10 months because she believes it's all his fault and truly believes his parents and sisters are exactly the same. Newsflash, they're all lovely people. 5 month update, I no longer associate with them, so I'm out of the loop regarding the juicy details. Last I heard, they keep moving all over the country and fight non-stop. No more lovey-dovey images on social media. Seems to be right on track for a 10-month breakup. Strangely enough, I didn't have the thought about the couple getting married, but the best man and maid of honor who were married to each other. The best man's speech was all about how hard it was to be married. I've been married for a year and it feels like 100 years. Maid of honor stands up to give a speech and just says, ditto. It was so awkward and really brought the whole room down. The brother of the bride stood up and gave a nice impromptu speech about teamwork and having a partner to go through life with. How happy the family was to have the groom join their family. Best man and maid of honor were divorced within a year. The couple who got married are still married 30 years later. I sometimes wonder if the speeches were actually helpful in how not to act as a couple. There's some complex backstory to the brother's speech. The bride's brother is gay and has been in a long-term relationship for 40+ years at time of writing. At the time he gave his speech about marriage, he couldn't marry the man he loved, and I think his passionate defense of marriage was born from that. When people would say they were against gay marriage because it makes a mockery of marriage, I'd think of that night. The married couple who had no respect for marriage could easily marry, and did over and over again. And the man who stood up and defended marriage could not. He's married now and lovingly takes care of his husband as he battles health issues. It's a special kind of thought process that leads a man to think that giving a speech about how much of a drag marriage is at a wedding will be a good idea. Well, at least he and his partner supported each other in that statement, for once. When they were doing the vows and the priest got to the for richer or poorer part, she said, for richer, or maybe poorer. The officiant wasn't pleased. I think they made it a year. I've got 2. One of my good friends got married and I'd never met her before the wedding because she's just shy. On the wedding day, she was belligerently drunk before the ceremony even started and couldn't even get through the lines she was supposed to repeat. Like, I promise to love you. She ended up slapping the groom, spilling champagne on her dress and then crying under a table while he tried to comfort her. They lasted about 4 months. Another one was my wife's friend. She's a very conservative, religious white girl who married a black man. Most of her racist family didn't approve of the marriage and didn't show up, but she planned the whole marriage around race. Like a vanilla cake for her and a chocolate cake for him, the wedding colors were black and white, and even the meals were white meat for her side and dark meat for his. It was extremely uncomfortable as a guest. They lasted 2 years, but broke up because he was nuts and attacked her, rather than the weird racial tension. My wedding. We'll start 3 days before. The wedding was a Ren Fair-style wedding outside a large gazebo, and the maid of honor had promised to purchase a stylized dress for my bride that they'd agreed on. 3 days before the wedding, she calls to tell us she has no money and was embarrassed to admit it before now. so we literally hand-sewed one together in 24 hours. In my opinion, it turned out pretty nice for what we had. The bride's mother was supposed to pick up the cake in Austin, Texas and drive an hour south for the wedding. She left her house 30 minutes before the wedding to pick it up. When she finally showed up, an hour late, the cake was destroyed. She had put it in the back seat and driven like hell all the way down, just slamming it against the box at every turn. During the 1-hour delay, there was almost a fistfight between two groomsmen because, well, the maid of honor showed up in the dress that she was unable to afford. Obvious attempt to upstage the bride. The same maid of honor during her speech after the ceremony started it off by saying, "When we all met, I didn't like Paul at all. However, I found he grows on you, like a fungus." Needless to say, my entire side of the family was super cold through all of this. Since all of these issues were on her side of friendships or families, I was told to suck it up and we'll discuss it later. I sort of assumed that a lot of these friends had just shown themselves the door. Quite the opposite. In fact, 2 years later, when I accepted my first well-paying job out of college, it became an issue that it was an hour and a half out of Austin, so she just decided to stay in ATX to be with her friends. I mailed her the divorce papers, and since she couldn't be bothered to even show up for the hearing, I've never seen her again. I used to work at David's Bridal. The bride came in with tons of friends, we did the say yes to the dress thing, and an hour later she was standing there in $3,000 worth of stuff and doesn't have any money with her or in her account. She decides she wants to apply for the store credit card. I run it through the system and she gets denied. Then she calls the groom for his info, which to be fair, people did all the time, and he tells her no. She threw a huge fit on the phone with him, standing on the bridal stage, literally demanding, "Why not? Why? Why?" Like an actual child over and over again. I've never seen a 30-year-old age backwards so quickly. She was just a brat, literally stomping her feet in front of me and all her friends and the other brides in the store. I was embarrassed. At the end of all that, she hangs up on him and her friend is like, "I'm so sorry you can't get your dress." And the bride instantly stops crying and goes, "Oh, I'll get the dress. I just have to do this at home, and when he gets mad enough, he'll come get it for me, so I'll stop." I was speechless. Sure enough, the girl came back 2 days later with her man and he applied for the credit card and brought the dress. He was livid and silent and she was smug as hell. Can't imagine they're living a happy marriage if they're still together. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. The bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, and other things. Note that I said extra stuff. It was already decorated by the venue, she just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago she sends my mother-in-law, the groom's mum, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she brought. $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mum's side. My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students, and many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me, babe, like the previous time you called me." The other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally messed up 20-year-olds or one big piece of performance art. As a man who has dabbled in theatre at a couple of different levels, I can confirm that drama students who take classes together have often seemed like a weird incestuous family. It's fine up until someone inevitably gets jealous. I was the maid of honor. Me, the best man, and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. The bride excused herself to go to the bathroom, and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking. Her cooking is something she's really passionate about, by the way. He was making these comments to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together, and gave him the warmest smile, thinking he had praised her. He scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her, but at her, behind her back. They lasted 7 months. A fun, light-hearted dance with the groom, followed by a close and slow dance with her male best friend. How long did that marriage last? It lasted 18 months, and now she's living with the friend. He ended up in the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He'd gone out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight, she left the house, and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. The groom showed up to his own wedding reception wearing a t-shirt with restroom sign-style stick figures depicting a bride and a groom, captioned, "Game over." The bride had a bruised eye covered by makeup. Also, it was visible that walking was hurting her. I might think it was because the corset was pushing on broken ribs. It took her 3 years to run away. When my sister married her first husband, she mouthed to my father walking her down the aisle, "I can make this work, right?" They were divorced 6 months later. My whole family knew it wasn't a good idea since the original engagement was a year prior. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When the bride drank vodka out of a pint glass and spent a significant amount of time making out with another guy on the dance floor. Oh well, the first part isn't necessarily a deal breaker. One of the best weddings I've ever been to included an Olympics between the bride and her bridesmaids, Russian, and the groom and his groomsmen, Lebanese. Main event was a vodka relay where they, no crap, chugged pint glasses. Lebanese put in a fantastic showing, but the Russians mopped the floor with them without even taking their heels off. It was hilarious. They all still managed to host and throw a wonderful party for another few hours, and they've been happily married for over a decade with 3 beautiful kids. Oh, and my husband just reminded me that these motherfrickers woke up the next morning and hosted brunch for us. Unbelievable. When the bride tried to playfully feed the groom some cake, pulling it back once it got close to his mouth. The third time she did this, he slapped it out of her hand and stormed off. In the ensuing awkward silence and wide-eyed staring, we all knew it wouldn't last. Surprisingly, they were together for nearly 2 years before the bride eloped away with her stepbrother. No one saw that coming. Prior to my wedding, I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. "What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarrassing me." We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. My uncle, when he broke his neck trying to break dance on his stag do, he went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now, but because of his surgery, he can't turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's freaking insane. Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms, and the girl next to me, the groom's ex, drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. I was at a wedding, I was a +1 for my date. The bride sat down drunk at our table and started talking to us. She then told me that she slept with her ex right before walking down the aisle. She screwed her ex in her wedding dress in the bridal suite. She then downed the last of my drink and went off to the dance floor. I was left speechless. I didn't know anyone but my date. Less than a year later, the bride and groom were divorced. He got so messed up at the reception, he had a fistfight with her cousin in the toilets over some white snow. He told all of the other cousins to F off. He hit on my aunt. He told my cousin's child to come back to him when she was 15 or 16, and he forgot to bring his own child to the hotel. I mean, I see absolutely no cracks in the foundation of those nuptials, and I'm roughly 28% sure that they may still be together. I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony, in the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They're divorced now. One of my friends got married. Afterwards, she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. When they got married illegally in high school, 2 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out. I actually know a happy version of this. My high school English teacher's friend and her boyfriend took a bus to the next state over where you could get married at age 16, and so they eloped in secret and came out about it after they graduated, and have been married for over 40 years and counting. My grandmother got married at 16 to my grandfather, who was 19. World War II hit and he was leaving to fight. In her own words, "I wanted to be his wife, even just for a little, and he didn't want to die before we were a family." He survived, came home, and they were happily married until death did them part. Where to start? We were the bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding. The best man was the groom's white snow dealer who got dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on white snow and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more to tell us, "Don't smoke green herb. If she, the host's wife, won't let me smoke green herb in the house, then you guys can't either." Every time we grouped up. The morning after the wedding at campfire coffee, the new bride turned to the groom and asked, "Are you going to wear your ring every day? Because it kind of makes you look like a slur for a gay person." Those of us there side-glanced and took deep sips of coffee. I think it lasted 4 to 6 months. My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she had summoned the photographer back, shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy for me." The groom showed up drunk after golfing with buddies all day. The bride in her vows said, "For richer," and left out the poorer. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time, across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip. When I was leaving, I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's going to be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months, I believe. One of my friends was the best man at another friend of ours' wedding. His best man speech included this line, "I prepared some lines for tonight, but the groom sniffed them all in the bathroom." 3 months later, there was a divorce due to a white snow problem. At my boyfriend's sister's wedding, the groom got drunk before the vows and smoked green herb after the vows, was cross-faded as heck and made a fool of himself. When we went up to congratulate them after, she refused to be near him or take pictures with him. It was awkward. After the speeches, basically everyone left. Family was still around and they opened gifts. Someone gifted nice champagne and the groom tried to open it and dropped it and it shattered. Bride stormed off screaming. The groom got upset and started cussing out the air. They still went to their honeymoon together in Florida and she got pregnant almost immediately. Maybe 7 months into her pregnancy, she kicked him out because he slept with her roommate. They got divorced when their kid was 6 months old. But it's for the best. The guy is an absolute piece of crap and wasted a lot of their money by being selfish on their day. I worked at a museum that also doubled as a wedding venue in the summers. As part of the wedding package, the museum would stay open after hours for the guests only, so I just sit there and greet people basically. One wedding got particularly rowdy, almost everyone was drunk, people were jumping into the fountain, and someone hurled in said fountain. At one point, the bride is crying. Turns out the groom and one of his groomsmen were doing the deed upstairs in one of the bathrooms. A fight ensued between the groom and the father of the bride, and the cops were called because it got really ugly. Entertaining for me, but I felt so bad for the bride. You know, everything about this wedding just screams British upper class, and I can't quite put my finger on why. I just can't see it happening in any other country or level of society. 2 friends of mine got married, and when they gave their vows, the guys started laughing at the part about being faithful. Whoops. I once watched a live stream of the wrong Vegas wedding. The link I was given for a friend's wedding was incorrect, and during the exchange of vows, the groom got to the part about being faithful and the bride visibly and audibly chuckled. It was hilarious to watch, but I bet they didn't last long. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony, and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us, the attendees, and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over again. Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it. They were together since junior high and would break up and reconcile every 3 to 6 months. Everyone was just sick of it. Friends and family, and the marriage, at age 19 in the summer between freshman and sophomore year at college, was obviously an attempt to force the relationship to stick. It did not, but at least no kids got involved. The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entered into a betting pool of how long the marriage would last at the wedding reception. I should say the bride and groom didn't participate, but everyone else did. That would have been glorious. If I recall correctly, the best man won. Price is Right rules at 14 months. The groom got into a fistfight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context, the groom and bride's dad, actually most people in these families if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though. The best man's speech was about how selfishly the groom had acted during a night out and telling him to treat marriage differently. The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. I wish I could remember the specifics, but it was all about how they were always together, all the late nights they'd spent together, etc. She was so tearful during it too. I'm not making it sound as bad as it was, but I assure you, it was bad. Portuguese wedding. A fistfight broke out at the head table during the reception, between two groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. The groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. I'm surprised it took that long. The midnight buffet was amazing, though. The most beautiful wedding I've ever been to ended in divorce. The venue was where the groom's father is buried, and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months, and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. People who have been straight up fired on the spot. What happened? Chef here. Got fired because I sent out a steak that had char on it. The only char on it was grill marks. Alright lady, you just saved me a huge mess. Who would want a steak without char? When I worked as a server, we had a family that would routinely come in and want well-done steaks with no black marks. They sent several steaks back the first time they came, and eventually one of our cooks microwaved their steaks. They came back 2 or 3 times a month for the rest of the time I worked there, and happily ate microwaved steaks. A bunch of weirdos. Everyone was fired in one fell swoop. They'd decided to stop having our work-from-home department. It explained why I'd spent the last 2 weeks training people who they'd originally said were not eligible to work my job. I handed my boss my 2 weeks' notice, and she ripped it in half and said, "Don't bother, you're done today." HQ wasn't too thrilled with her decision, as they had to pay me a severance because of her hatred toward me. I came back to my summer job at an amusement park from missing 3 days with strep throat. I handed in my doctor's excuse and was fired for missing work. Apparently, to call off, you couldn't just talk to a manager, you had to talk to the department head, a person I'd never met with a phone number that had never been made available to me. Because I missed more than 2 days, it didn't matter that I had a note, because I was considered a no-call and no-show. The assistant manager I gave my excuse to handed me a letter back that said I had 10 minutes to clear out my locker and vacate the premises, or they'd call the cops for trespassing. I was 16 in a state with very liberal employment laws, and my mum retained a lawyer. I didn't win any money, but they ended up having to list me as rehirable in their system, and they paid a huge fine for essentially making it impossible for employees to call in sick. That's just ridiculous. Surely when you told your manager initially, the smart thing to do would be to give you that person's number, so they don't have to go through the effort of hiring someone else. I was one of 200 employees. They did not care. I was having trouble making sense of the harsh policy up until I read that last part. Of course, it makes sense that unskilled teens are easy to replace, but throwing away an otherwise reliable staff member for an explained absence would be really dumb in smaller businesses. Was working in the deli counter of a supermarket. I asked my closest manager if I could come next week on Thursday 2 hours later because I had a final exam that morning. Got fired on the spot. Don't bother coming into work tomorrow, you're fired. I was told Friday out of nowhere, we won't be needing your services anymore. After being told in November I would have a position into next year at the minimum. So that was a fun holiday gift. Same. Let go before Thanksgiving after 5 years at a company and negotiated my new raise with substantial documentation of my worth to the company. I was replaced almost immediately and suspect my raise was given to that individual. I witnessed the following. I worked at a camera store many years ago and we received a life-size cutout of Andre Agassi, the tennis player, who was promoting Canon cameras. We set up the cutout in the store, but our crotchety owner came in, didn't like it, and told us to throw it out. So we put it away, but when the owner went out for lunch, we took it back out and proceeded to take a few goofy pictures in front of it. Then we put it back away. When the owner came back from lunch, he returned to his office and then 5 minutes later came rushing down the stairs, red-faced and screaming. We'd forgotten about the security camera and his secretary had snitched on us. "I told you to throw that thing out," he screamed. He then went into the back room, dragged Andre out, and started trying to tear the thing apart, bending the head back and forth. That cardboard is pretty tough though, and he was not a strong guy, so he just stood there for 30 seconds, furiously struggling with it. We were all trying to hold it in, but one of my coworkers couldn't help it and started laughing at the absurdity. Our owner heard it, whipped around and screamed, "You're fired! Get out of my store immediately!" We were all shocked, but the guy picked up his jacket, walked out, never to be seen again. I was fresh out of college at an IT contract-to-hire job. I came in on a Tuesday, sat down at my desk, and the boss came up behind me and told me I was fired. I sat there open-mouthed and then asked, why? He said that I was not a good fit for the company and that I had to leave. So I gathered my things and he stood there watching me, probably making sure I didn't steal anything, and escorted me out of the office. I found out later that because of the size of the company at the time, they were looking for a Tier 3 worker, but I was Tier 1. I told them this in the interview, but apparently they did not have the resources to train me. Well, joke's on them, I went through a month of unemployment and found an even better IT job where I make a lot of money and work only half as hard as on that job. Well, that worked out well. Yes, in the end it did, but it was a whole month of not having a job. I applied to 5 jobs a day. I didn't have any interviews throughout the whole month of applying for jobs. I got called by a headhunter company that told me I could interview for the position I have now between Christmas and New Year's. I got the job and eventually got full employment, and my wife and I just had a baby when I got fired at the time. I told my manager at a fast food place that I was going to be looking for a new job and to not schedule me after this pay period. The next week I see my name on the schedule and ask her what the deal is. I told you I was going to get a new job and to not schedule me. Well, did you get a new job yet? No, but I'm still not sticking around for this one. Well, you know what, you can just not come back here now with that attitude. She sure showed me. It's the best thing in the world when idiots fire you when you're trying to quit. Cool, thanks for the unemployment checks. I was working for a small, family-owned restaurant. All the waitstaff and most of the kitchen staff were family or friends with the owner. I was hired as a waitress and I did okay, not great, not terrible. It was my first time being a waitress. One day, one of their regular customers came in who's a bit of a local celebrity. He apparently came in once or twice a week and tipped very well. Normally, the owner's daughter would take the table, but she was out sick, so I took them. I got an amazing tip from him, and he told the owner that he would like me to wait on them if I'm available in the future. The second he left, I was fired. What? For what reason, and what would they tell Mr. Fancy Pants when he came in again? I was told that they couldn't afford to keep me on as a waitress, basically. It was so many years ago that I can't remember the exact excuse she gave me. But her reaction when Mr. Fancy Pants requested me was more than enough context I needed. I never went back to the restaurant after that, but I learned it shut down a year or two later. I fired a person for disappearing on their first day of work after a couple of hours. We worked in the manufacturing plant and he took off to try and find some cute girl he knew that worked there. The guy was married and he asked, "What am I supposed to tell my wife?" I said, "Probably not the truth." Me and my friend were 2 young Irish lads working on rebuilding the Canary Wharf Tower in London, which had been blown up by some other Irish lads a year earlier, but that's another story. It was like Nakatomi Plaza. There were so many floors, if you didn't feel like working, you could just go to some random floor and hide out for a while. So me and my friend, both 18 years old, were hungover one morning. We went to the 23rd floor, where there was a comfortable couch and we lay there smoking green herb. Suddenly, the English foreman appears and fires us on the spot. As he was walking away, he says, "That was taking the mick, lads." Unfortunately, there was somewhat of a misunderstanding here. What he meant was that our behavior was so bad we crossed a line. However, in Ireland at the time, "that was taking the mick" meant I'm only joking. So we continued working for another 3 or 4 hours before he came back and said, "I fired you this morning, what the hell are you still doing here?" For the record, the foreman in the original written story actually said, "You're taking the not safe for work word for urine." But we can't say that here, and the closest possible alternative the narrator could think of was, "You're taking the mick," which ironically is a pretty derogatory term for an Irish person, lending a whole new confusing angle to the foreman's statement. Sorry. Not me, but my brothers. He was valeting at a fancy beach club over the summer, and they hired a new kid from the area. The first car this new hire gets into, he backs into another car. My brother takes him to the side, tells him to calm down, the beach has insurance for this very reason, it's no big deal. Second car, the guy runs right into a parked car, which causes that car to smash into the one parked in front of it. My brother gives him $50 cash for the day of work and tells him not to come back. The summer between undergrad and graduate school, I was working in the customer service department of a Canadian department store. I got minimum wage plus $1 extra an hour because I was the only person capable of answering the phones in English and French. I asked for a Saturday off to attend my sister's high school graduation. They said, "What's more important to you, this job or the graduation?" I said, "Well, the graduation actually, particularly in the light of the fact that I was starting my second degree in another city about 10 weeks later." I got axed immediately. Well, good luck finding a bilingual Albertan willing to work for minimum wage +1, you stupid eggplant suckers. I was 15, I think. I was a lifeguard at a subdivision pool. Being the new guy and the young kid, I worked every weekend. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday day. I'd already missed going to my grandparents a couple of times and my parents were taking a vacation. I asked off and was told that I couldn't go. My dad basically said, "You're going, I don't care." I told the boss this and she said, "You still have to work." I left with my parents, and when I got back there were a dozen messages on my parents' answering machine saying they couldn't open the pool because I wasn't there. She fired me 3 or 4 times that weekend. She was a bored housewife hired by the Homeowners Association to schedule the lifeguards who were mostly high school kids. She fired another for wearing a bikini. They didn't use her the next year, but by that point in time I was 16 and had a better job. They couldn't open the pool because I wasn't there? Not exactly a solid business plan if it counts on a 15-year-old having a 100% attendance at work. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was told that my position was being terminated, not just at our branch but company-wide, and was escorted back to my office to pack up my stuff. It wasn't dramatic or anything, but it was a shock. I didn't get to say goodbye to anybody. Just 2 days prior, I'd had my performance review and received glowing praise, while the entire time they knew they'd be letting me go in a couple of days. That's what bothered me the most. My first job out of college was for a very small dental insurance claims clearinghouse. The company had recently split from another company whose name was on the software that all the dentist offices used, so that was the name they recognized. The two companies were basically fighting over their client base. So my job was to call up all of their clients to remove the old software from the former partner and install all the new janky second-rate programs they'd cobbled together since the split. My job alternated between calling up customers to install the new software and train them on it, and troubleshooting the problems with the software and come up with workarounds, typically during training calls. Clients were typically finding out from me that the software was changing and I was supposed to insist that it was the same company, just different software. After almost a year of this, I was getting to the point where it felt just so awful to trudge my way into work because I knew I'd spend the day getting yelled at by clients who were upset that their routines were changing. I spent a lot of my downtime complaining to my friends over my personal email about how awful it was. Probably not the best thing to do, but I was young. Well, one day I came back from lunch and found the door to my office closed and my boss standing there waiting for me. He showed me the emails he'd printed out from my personal email account with portions of conversations highlighted that he didn't like. I never used any names or revealed any company information, just my emotions while working there. He shoved the papers in my hands and said, "Explain this to me." I basically said I was having trouble with day-to-day grind, but he responded with, "I think it's time for you to find something else. Get out of here." Fine by me, I probably should have left before it got to that point, but hindsight is 20/20 and all that. I was 16 and it was my first job as a lifeguard in a neighborhood by my house. It was a very relaxed pool and we were never completely packed, and the kids that did frequent the pool seemed like me. As a lifeguard, I was often audited. The pool company owner's son would come around and test our lifeguard skills, and I passed twice that summer. Towards the beginning of August, he came around while our pool was shut down because of thunder and rain, and I kid you not, they audited me while it was storming. Me, young and stupid, not wanting to lose my job, said, "Okay," and in comes the owner's son's friend who probably weighed over 300 pounds. I'm 115. He jumped into the deep end and sank to the bottom, and I was supposed to save him. I tried and couldn't do it. He was dead weighting me, and I'm pretty sure he was pushing himself to the bottom, and rain was getting in my eyes and I was panicking because lightning. I came back up and I was fired on the spot. I got a call back later saying we'd love to have you if you took the training class again. The class was 10 hours Friday through Sunday, 30 hours. I said no and hung up. Earlier this year, I was working in a chicken processing plant in the freezer section. We rotated through 4 tasks in this area: making boxes, packing boxes, labeling boxes, and stacking boxes. Now, I had no problem with this. It was easy, if boring work. What I did have a problem with was labeling the boxes. We had to stand in such a way that I was slightly bent at the waist the entire time, and for some reason this was causing a nerve to get pinched in my back. Tons of pain. I toughed it out for 2 weeks. After that, I couldn't take it anymore. I explained this to my boss. Told her that I'd gladly do a double on packing the chicken, everyone hated that part, if I could just not label the boxes anymore. Or I'd take a double making boxes or stacking boxes, didn't matter to me. Nope. Instead, I was fired and told to vacate the property. They wouldn't even let me sit in the visitor area until my ride arrived. Ended up spending 30 minutes standing in 27 degrees Fahrenheit weather on the side of the road waiting on my ride. Yes, I'm aware of the fact that firing me in such a way was illegal, and no, I couldn't draw unemployment. I'd only worked there for 2 weeks. Officially, I was fired for refusing to perform assigned duties. As for the company in question, Wayne Farms in Georgia. I won't give any more information than that, but if you live in Georgia, there's a good chance any chicken you've eaten from Zaxby's, Burger King, Bojangles, Popeyes, or Chick-fil-A has passed through one of their plants. I'm a security guard now. Pay isn't as good, but it's a lot less stressful. Plus, I no longer eat chicken, especially not fast food chicken, not after what I saw in that place. If you're in the southern states, do not eat fast food chicken. You know, I'm not sure I've read a single account from the people who work at these meat plants who say that they didn't end up not eating that food or becoming vegan afterwards. That should probably be a warning for the rest of us. Ironically, I was having a really positive day at work. I'd been there about 9 months and was starting to really hit my stride. I'd made some really positive improvements with production process and workflow. The company was better for my time there. My work actually resulted in them being able to eliminate an entire position, saving the company around 20 to 30k a year. Around 3 p.m., I'm called into our small conference room and told that I'm being fired for saying that I hate this fricking job and that I wasn't willing to go back into the warehouse and help out in the mornings. So I was caught completely off guard, and the fact that this was coming from the owner meant I knew that there was nothing I could say. But I still defended myself by saying there was no way I would have said that I hated my job. But still, I was guided to my desk where I packed my stuff in shock and headed out. I remained in contact with one of my coworkers, and about a year later it came out that the same thing was tried on her. Turns out the operations manager was a nut, and having the ear of the owners, she would straight up lie to them and get people fired. Why? I still don't know, but they knew the second coworker much longer and better than myself. So when operations manager told them what that coworker supposedly was doing, they talked to her directly and determined that the OM was lying. This time, the OM got canned. There are days I wish they'd still have the stones to reach out to me and apologize. It's been 5 years now though, so that won't be happening. The experience really shook me and I can still see the effects to this day. That was my first real job out of college, and I'd decorated my little office with personal items, some drawings my daughter had done, and other things. Now I refuse to decorate with anything personal, and I keep the bare minimum of personal articles in my office. Getting canned and having to stand there and be watched while I had to collect all of these personal artifacts was embarrassing and humiliating. I don't plan on being fired again, but if needs be, I can grab 1 or 2 things, tops, and walk to my car. I forgot to pay for a hot dog I ate the previous day of work. I had the money to pay, and I would have if they'd asked me to. It genuinely slipped my mind, but the manager was treating me as a serious thief. Kinda sucked, but the job was pretty terrible too. Retail usually is. I should probably clarify that some of my coworkers had had this happen to them before I was fired, but the difference being was that they got warnings. It doesn't bother me much because that manager was actually pretty scummy in the long run, and she lost the majority of her employees about a week after I was fired. 17, still in high school. I was hired as a custodian for a hotel and was asked to clean the pool. I was asked to backflush the system to clean the filters, which involves turning the pumps off and closing pipe valves. Well, there's about 20 valves, but only 3 needed to be closed. I thought I did them right. I went to open the filter on the pump and boom! The cap shot off and water started dumping out of the pump. The pool maintenance room is in the basement next to the pool, so it'll dump the whole pool if it's not stopped. I panicked and tried forcing the cap back on. Ran upstairs and through the hotel completely soaked. It was the weekend, so my boss was off. Took him about 20 minutes to reach and get him to the hotel to help me with the system. In the end, there was probably a foot of water flooding the floor. It damaged the water heaters, got into the furnace, maintenance office, and phone system. Not sure on the damage cost, but it had to be in the hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million. I was promptly fired by the hotel manager. I hated my last job. My coworkers were all right, but the guy over my department was a real butthole. Well, the time finally came after many years. I got an offer and of course I said yes. I'd been plotting this moment. From my backpack, I pull a sympathy card that I'd been holding onto for a while. On the front, "In memories we find comfort, in time we find peace." On the inside, "So sorry for your loss." I sign my name, add a date for now plus 14 days. Hand it to the boss man. Now, I know for a fact that boss man would find it hilarious if this had happened to literally any other boss person in the company. But he had several sticks up his butt, so he fired me, told me, "Hands off the computer." yelled for a bit, insulted me several times, then walked me out the door. The company lawyer called in short order. "We've accepted your 2 weeks' notice. We don't require you to serve those 2 weeks, but you'll get paid for it." I guess the whole "you need to learn about your actions have consequences" bullcrap that the bossman tried to pull when I submitted my notice kind of backfired on him. The bossman in question had a habit of yelling at people in exit interviews. I like to think they didn't schedule one for me because he knew I wouldn't put up with it. I was 16 and working as a dishwasher at a summer tennis camp at an exclusive tennis club. The owner of the club was upset that I hadn't taken all the trash out. I explained to him that the dumpster was full and overflowing. He told me that I needed to climb into the dumpster and jump up and down on the trash to create more room for it. I said that I wouldn't do it. He told me that he wouldn't ask me to do anything that he wouldn't do himself, so I said, "Fine, I want to see you climb into the dumpster and start jumping up and down." He fired me on the spot. For those of you that agree with the owner, you should really check up on how OSHA and the health department would feel about this. What was the most embarrassing public tantrum you've seen a grown adult throw? My first job in high school, working at an ice cream parlor. We had 3 sizes, 2 scoops, 1 scoop, and child size. Why it wasn't just large, medium, and small? Don't ask me. One day, a guy that had to be well into his 80s slowly walks in. It was an early afternoon before the typical rush at night, so he was able to walk right up to the counter and stare at our board of flavors, toppings, etc. You can see on his face he's getting irate for some reason. He's pacing quicker. Here and there you can see his mouth open to talk, but he doesn't. And then finally he speaks. "I want your smallest ice cream, but it's absolutely demeaning that I have to order a child size. I'm a grown man. I have children and grandchildren of my own." This goes on, and I'm unable to get a word in edgewise. He keeps going, and finally I interrupt. "How about this? I just give you the smallest size we have, call it a small, and charge you for our cheapest ice cream." For some reason, this answer wasn't acceptable. He goes back into his rant about being a grown man, and is now screaming at me about how insulted he was. I again reiterate, I can just give you a small ice cream, but no, anything beneath an institutional change wasn't going to stop this guy. He just kept going. Now other customers are starting to walk in and just watch him rant, screaming, "Do I look like a child?" and things like, "I have grandchildren older than you." Meanwhile, he's refusing to order something else, or just consider the smallest size as small rather than child size, which was written on the board, and won't leave either. The owner now comes in from the back to see what's going on because there's now a long line. This has been going on a good 10 minutes. As is usual in these situations, the owner introduces himself as the owner, which prompted the response, "Good, your employee insulted me." As the man explained how I insulted him, the owner pivoted to the same thing I did. "Can we just call it a small and be on with it?" This made things worse. Finally, after him screaming at the owner for a few more minutes, the owner says, "You came into my shop, don't like the name I used for my ice cream sizes, berated one of my employees, and are berating me. Please stop using the phrase disrespected because you're the only one being disrespectful." Usually, in internet stories, this is when the writer puts, "and everyone clapped," but no one did. The situation was just too awkward for them to acknowledge that they were paying attention. The old man went to talk and the owner cut him off and just said, "Let me be frank. Tell me what will make you happy and I'll do it." The old man stood there for a few seconds and just angrily said, "I'll never come back here again," and walked back out the door. In conclusion, I got screamed at because the ice cream shop I worked at called a small a child size. In food service, I met so many customers who stormed out over stupid crap claiming they'd never return, but sadly, most of them did. Complaining is what makes them happy, and people in customer service put up with it longer than most. Yep. Is this the same in retail, or is it mainly a hospitality thing? Because I feel like I encountered enough of these for several lifetimes. I help my cousin out on jobs where he gets in over his head. One time our uncle went out for sandwiches and got them for the whole crew. My grown, 45-year-old cousin had a freaking meltdown on the job site and started throwing crap because his sandwich had pickles on it. He broke the windows of his own vehicle and destroyed about $1,000 worth of materials over pickles. We're both on the spectrum, but he was never disciplined as a child and allowed to lash out, so he does it frequently. This is the biggest one I've ever seen anyway. I used to work as a manager at a wings place. A lady and a guy got incredibly upset at us when they asked for their order and we didn't have it. "We've been waiting for 30 minutes. How isn't it done?" "We don't have any orders in the last week with that name. I don't know what to tell you." "Well, we paid for it." "Would it be under a different name perhaps?" "Oh yeah, our son ordered it. Try Jack Smith instead. Not actually his name, but you get it." "Okay, that's not showing up either. How about you show me your receipt and I can look up the confirmation number?" The girl hands me the receipt. The son ordered their food under the name EA Sports, It's in the Game. When I let them know what it was actually under and got the food for them, they legit were screaming at me and trying to say it was my fault. The guy started throwing chairs at other customers and hit the windows with a large rock. Police were called and they left. Eventually, the guy came back 3 hours later to yell at me and my crew more, and we called the police a second time. I pray for that son and I hope he's okay. His parents seemed a little off their rockers. I once had someone refuse to give me a name for an order, not food-related. The job was expected to take roughly half an hour. And they were like, "Can't you just remember us?" I said I might not be here when they get back, just give me any name. So they clearly made one up, something like John Smith. They came back hours later, even though they promised to be back in half an hour, and gave me their real name instead of the fake one. Then started getting crappy when I couldn't find it. I remembered who they were eventually, but I thought it might be a good lesson in why you need to remember your damn names. I've posted this before, but I witnessed some lady having a full-blown tantrum in a Culver's drive-thru. I was on the headset that day, and when she pulled up to the order screen, I asked for her order. She snapped back that she wasn't ready, so I told her to go ahead and order when she was ready. For whatever reason, that set her off because again she snapped back and said, "You know what, just for that, I will take my time." She sat silently in her car for a few minutes and I could hear the cars behind her starting to honk. The car directly behind her must have caught on to her just sitting there refusing to order, so he pulled around her, drove up to my window and asked if he could order directly from me. The other cars in line must have noticed as well, because when I handed him his receipt, they began to pull in front of the lady refusing to order and started a new line at my window ordering directly from me. The lady who refused to order went absolutely bananas. She laid on her horn, grabbing her steering wheel and started thrashing around, shaking her car violently, screaming at the top of her lungs that people were cutting in front of her. She eventually drove around to my drive-thru window, gave me the finger and did a burnout. I think that was the biggest tantrum I've seen an adult throw. I love imagining these people relaying stories like this to their loved one. "You won't believe how that B-word at the window told me to, checks notes, order when I was ready." Unfortunately, my grandma is one of these. She of course changes the tone of everything, so instead of, "Just let me know when you're ready to order," it's, "'Kay, let me know when you're ready," eye roll. A longtime parishioner entered church on Sunday and saw a new young family sitting in her pew. She told them that they'd have to move as they were sitting in the pew she'd occupied for worship services for many years. As I once described, when they refused to relocate, the lady said, in full voice for all to hear, that she wouldn't stand for their insubordination and that she was leaving and taking her substantial pledge with her. I mean, Jesus lost his crap completely at people trying to hustle outside of his dad's temple, and yet 2,000 years later there's a massive sect of Christians that missed the memo. I do business with a local AT&T store. I was getting a phone for our company and this guy was trying to get an iPhone for his teenage daughter. I'm not sure what went on, but apparently they didn't have the exact phone she wanted and they were going to have to order it. That wasn't good enough, so he started having a full-blown temper tantrum saying the sales associate was ruining his daughter's birthday gift. The manager comes out to see what's going on and there's another customer who's in there and this guy is like 6'5", goatee, bald head, roided up with a full sleeve tattoo, and he says, "Hey, calm down." And the angry dad said, "Who said that?" The bald giant said, "I did," in a very angry voice, and the dad just put his head down and shut up. The manager was trying to see what was going on, and the dad was like, "We're gonna go now." I wish I could say everyone clapped, but the sales associate was extremely grateful. Years ago when I was waitressing, a kid threw garbage into our potted plant and I made the kid remove it. Then the mom tried to yell at me, but a little old Israeli lady got up and told her off. This old lady was tiny, but steely. Like you could believe she had fired a machine gun during the war. The soccer mom skedaddled out of there. When I used to work at Best Buy, a woman was absolutely teed off and threatening to sue for false advertisement because a Kindle case was $2 cheaper than what was listed in the ads in the Sunday paper. Okay, so my early question about whether this happens as much in retail seems to have been definitively answered by a few other posts now. Hospo and retail slaves, unite! My own mother. We were getting food at a food truck. They must have pressed the wrong button or something because she got charged for $11 when it should have been $10. My mum immediately blows up about it, demanding they give her back her $1. The cashier apologized profusely and said it was a mistake. They got the manager or owner or whatever to come over and help refund the money. The whole time they're trying to figure the computer out, my mum is ranting and raving about how they were overcharging her on purpose to pocket the money since she didn't tip. She calls them thieves and criminals. I straight up told her, "I'll give you $1 right now if you stop," and of course she says it's all about the principal. After they fix it, we leave. She keeps ranting to me about it, so I make up an excuse to leave. Later in a text, she tells me she went to the nearest police station after that and made a report against them. I very much wish I could have seen the police officer's reaction. I bet they were dying laughing inside and probably threw her report away the moment she left. This woman is 40 years old. What in the actual frick? Frick, you just reminded me of a client. I work in an animal hospital that called and left a message for the doctor she just saw stating, "I found some white fur on me, and I know it didn't come from my dog because he has black fur. I find this absolutely unacceptable, and I will be leaving a message with the hospital manager." Neither of us heard anything from the hospital manager. The last time I was at Heathrow Airport, I witnessed a woman in her 30s, dressed in business attire, literally kicking and screaming because they wouldn't let her take an open carton of juice through the security checkpoint. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My sister had the worst temper of anyone I've ever known. We were at the drive-thru at McDonald's. She had ordered McNuggets with barbecue sauce. When we got to the window, she was handed the nuggets but no sauce. She just sat there staring expectantly at the cashier. Finally, she said, "Well, are you going to give me my sauce or what?" The cashier turned to the side, away from the window, and my sister said, "Excuse me, are you deaf? Where's my sauce?" The cashier said, "I'm getting it." The cashier handed over fistfuls of sauce packets and didn't do it in a friendly way. So my sister threw half of the packets directly at the face of the cashier and called her the B word. Then she drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I absolutely hated going anywhere with my sister because she regularly caused a scene over the dumbest things. I have a friend that's similarly embarrassing no matter where we went. The hardware store won't cut the eaves shorter? The frick is wrong with you? Don't you know these won't fit in my fricking car? The ice cream place didn't have any hot fudge ready? What kind of fricking idiots are you people? I stopped hanging out with her because of that. I was at Friendly's with a group of friends. One of them brought their boyfriend with them. We all got our treats and sat down. This dude comes up to us and says, "Do you think I should complain about the slushie not having enough syrup?" We all kind of agree that sure, it's okay to see if they can do something to fix it. He goes up there and talks to the girl at the register. I couldn't make out everything, but essentially she told them that they made it the way they were told and she couldn't do anything. He takes what remains of his slushie and slams it on the counter, getting it everywhere. He yells at her that she can take the drink back then. A manager tells him that he's got to go. We were all just in shock. I didn't even know where to put my face, I was so embarrassed. Him, on the other hand, he wasn't ashamed at all. My friend defends her boyfriend, saying that it wasn't a big deal and they should really have fixed his drink. Customer service for a doctor's office credit card program. Spent 45 minutes trying to help a doctor change his password. I couldn't actually help them because every time I would tell them to do something specific, they would do this stress, sigh, sobbing kind of thing. Would remind me every 30 seconds that he went to school for 8 years so he wouldn't have to deal with this. Mind you, he was clearly in his 20s and 30s, not an old guy that has an excuse to not know how to do it. After the 45 minutes of this rotation, he finally passed the phone to his receptionist. We shared a laugh over his attitude, and we reset the password in 30 seconds. As someone else who's worked tech support for doctors' offices, I feel this pain so deeply in my soul. I honestly have begun to wonder if you can't keep up with technological advancements required for your job, like EMRs and password requirements, how in the heck am I supposed to believe you can keep up with medical advancements too? Yikes. I've seen a stranger throw a tantrum because he didn't know what to order for breakfast. Asked for input, but for some reason got angry when our cashier suggested a breakfast sandwich. My uncle threw a tantrum and stormed off to bed because he was the first person out when we were playing Monopoly. The following night, he again was the first person out, but instead of storming off to bed, he sat there and sulked because, and I quote, "Last night I didn't get any. I wonder why." First out in Monopoly is better than winning, actually. I sell safety equipment to major companies. You have to have paperwork to get discounts for this stuff. I've had multiple grown men come in, tell me they work for X and they want the company discount. I tell them I need their forms and they begin throwing a fit. They throw around the whole, "Do you know who I am?" bit, and get even madder when I do not in fact know who they are. If you were such a big shot, why don't you have the form? At the Burning Man entry gate, we take special delight in making sure that the privileged jerks follow the rules. Since we're the ones in control, it's more like malicious bureaucracy than malicious compliance, but the stories are similar enough. Most of these morons are no-name DJs and artists. No, we will not call the boss of Burning Man because you said you're friends with her. So we have a saying, "Do you know who I think I am?" I don't know who thought that trying to heft around your minor celebrity status to a bunch of free spirits in the desert would go well, but they fully deserved all the sarky treatment they received. The one I will always remember happened over 20 years ago. Long story slightly shorter, and this was back before September 11th. A man and his girlfriend came to the gate at the airport. There was some mix-up where the girlfriend had given her luggage to the skycap, but hadn't checked in for the flight, so she didn't have a boarding pass. The flight was oversold and there was no seat available for her. It was a flight to Washington, D.C., and it was the last one out until tomorrow morning. When this guy finds out she can't get on the plane, he goes ballistic. He literally starts screaming at the gate agent. In a post-September 11th world, I'm reasonably certain he would have been arrested or at least kicked out of the airport. He's going on and on about how important he is and that he's a member of some platinum club. How dare his girlfriend not get on the plane? People with the cheap tickets should be booted to accommodate her. He'll reach out to the corporate offices, etc. Basically, he was making a huge public butt out of himself. Well, it wasn't this gate agent's first rodeo either. She let him scream himself out, and when he took a breath, she looked at him and said, "There is exactly one person who can get your girlfriend onto the plane, and that person is me. I suggest you take a seat, be patient, and I'll see what I can do." He started going off again, and she said louder than him, "I will see what I can do." Finally, he sat down. She made some phone calls, typed on her computer, and finally came over the loudspeaker saying, "This flight is overbooked. Do we have any customers willing to take a later flight for X amount of flight vouchers?" Silence. She asked a couple more times, raising the ante, and again, silence. Now, I had nowhere to be until Tuesday, so I could have easily taken a flight the next day, but I'll be darned if that idiot is going to get his way. Seems like everyone else there felt the same way. No one took the offer. Eventually, she called the two of them over and said, "I'm sorry, I've offered the max amount of vouchers I can and no one's taking it. I need to start boarding now. If she needs to get out tonight, she can try another airline or I can put her on tomorrow's flight right now." The guy was like, "Frick you," and walked off with his very embarrassed girlfriend in tow as he was muttering under his breath, "Bye-bye." If the guy hadn't been such a first-class prick to the gate agent, who literally had nothing to do with the situation, she could have taken my seat and been on her way. Oh man, I've been dying for a question like this. Does anyone remember the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce release at McDonald's a few years ago? Anyways, my friend loves the show, but couldn't go due to work, so I went to try and get some for him. There was a line of people who'd been waiting for a while. Apparently, some of the workers gave them out to people in the drive-thru, so they were all out and all they had were posters. A couple of guys were throwing complete temper tantrums and screaming and cussing out the workers for not properly handing out the sauce packets. After screaming at them for a good 10 to 15 minutes, the guy demands a poster. The worker says they have to purchase a meal in order to get the poster, and the guy flips out again and orders a meal in a really condescending tone. As soon as he gets the meal and his poster, he takes his meal and starts throwing it against the walls, and then takes his two children with the poster and walks away while cussing at them on the way out. The next few guys in the line do the same thing. They only had like 5 to 8 posters. The vast majority of people towards the front all threw baby tantrums and threw their food and drinks everywhere, making a huge mess. Luckily, I recorded a decent amount of it. Absolutely insane how childish these grown men were acting over a fricking sauce packet. Most of them had their children with them too. It was honestly just so insane, I couldn't believe it. I worked at McDonald's in high school. There were a few, but one stands out above all of the others. It's lunchtime and we're busy. The Filet-O-Fish is not a particularly popular sandwich, so we only ever had a couple of pieces of fish ready to avoid having to throw them away. A guy comes into the drive-thru and orders 4. I kid you not, as his order is popping up on our screen, the whole timer for the 2 fish we had already made was going off. We have to fry 2 regardless, so we decide to just make all 4 fresh. The manager apologizes and tells the guy to pull forward and wait. He's not happy, but he does. Meanwhile, we keep serving people who didn't order fish. After the third car or so gets their order and leaves, the guy is in the lobby demanding to see the manager. He wants to know why he's still waiting since we're clearly serving other people. The manager explains that none of these people ordered fish and that the fish will be ready in a few minutes. Apologizes again for the wait. The guy is teed off. He starts yelling about how it's ridiculous that we have no fish ready. The manager explains how the hold timer went off and she wasn't about to serve anyone expired food. Since we had to make a couple anyway, we're making you all 4 fresh. Most people would be happy that they weren't served questionable food, but not this guy. The guy went ballistic. He started yelling about how we should have served him the 2 we had and we shouldn't serve anyone else until his order, blah blah blah, you get the idea. Then he threatens my manager with physical violence if he's not served his order right now. She tells him he needs to go out to his car right now or she'll be calling the police. The guy storms out of the restaurant, slamming the door so hard behind him that he broke it. A few seconds later, we hear screeching tires as he leaves the parking lot without his fish. My father. Probably more to do with the fact that I was related to him and it ruined a day trip, but here it is. So at the time, we, mother, father, teenage brother, and preteen me, lived close to a great beach and there was a small amusement park next to it. A variety of issues meant going there as a family for a day out was a special treat, and something that was highly anticipated. We hadn't decided if we'd do the beach, doing some boogie boarding, or the amusement park, water slide, and crazy golf. So we took the boards with us, but in the end decided not to use them. This was very bad. My mother was a deficient human being for bringing them with us and committing the crime of bringing unnecessary items on a day trip. In the car park, in full view of everyone, there he was, screaming. He threw his hat on the ground and was jumping up and down, clenching his fists as if he were having a vertical seizure. Of course, we knew not to say anything because he would just become violent and we had to walk on eggshells for the rest of the day. I have since gone no contact with him and he was shocked, convinced that someone had manipulated me into it, because he never did anything that would make someone not want to be in a relationship with him. What is the most awesome way you saw someone quit their job? One of my cooks calmly walked to the ice machine in the middle of the shift. I didn't think too much of it until he came back with a bucket of ice and dumped it in the fryers. The entire kitchen went dead silent for what seemed like forever. Then all of a sudden, the low boiling noise started. Within seconds, the fryers are throwing boiling water all over the place. About 30 seconds later, they catch on fire, and the fire suppression system goes off. It sprays a 6-inch layer of foam everywhere. The guy walked to the microphone in the kitchen and calmly says, "F all of you, I'm out." We had to shut down for 2 days to clean up the mess, and the cook was arrested and sued. It was epic, but it couldn't have been worth it in the end. Working at a movie theater just kept popping popcorn, like overflowing onto the ground. Didn't even look away until the manager said, "You're fired." I worked at a movie theater in high school. One of the other kids who worked there was getting super sick of our mostly insufferable, greasy-haired, limping whale of a boss. So one day, our boss asked him to clean out all the garbage in the back room, and he drops his pants to the floor, throws 2 birds in the air, and quits. Then he walked out from behind the counter, through the lobby full of guests, to the parking lot, with his pants around his ankles and his middle fingers in the air. Most hilarious crap I've ever seen. Friend works at a major shopping center in a deli. It was his last day anyway, so he wasn't exactly trying to get fired. He changed one of the signs on the trays of meat to hand-strangled veal. Not one person noticed all day. I had just walked into a Taco Bell about a minute before where someone quit on the spot and freaking trashed the place. I mean food and cups and bags and drinks all over the place behind the counter. One worker girl was frantically on the phone with the police, just freaking out and saying, "He trashed the place! He trashed the place!" Needless to say, I did not get my bean burrito. Worked at a restaurant a few years ago that was the pits. It was a terrible place to work, but the tips were great, so I stuck with it. One guy had had enough of it after his paycheck bounced, so he went into the manager's office, looked her square in the eye and said, "I quit, you frickin' B-word," and placed his apron on the desk. As he was walking through the kitchen, he took one of the sacks of flour we used to make dough with, threw it over his shoulder and said, "This is mine," and walked out. Although the man's defiance is admirable, some of the follow-up questions make a valid point about his choice of plunder. One commenter summarizes the points nicely. "If you're going to appropriate food in lieu of your paycheck, I suggest you raid the filet mignon and the saffron, not the flour. There's nothing worse than getting a paycheck and it gets freaking denied. I usually just take my check straight to the bank my boss uses and get cash, then put it in my bank that's further away later on in the week. I'll never forget sitting at the drive-thru and the lady coming back to the window and saying, 'Sir, your boss doesn't have enough money in his account to cover this.'" Some background first. I worked at a company that had an owner who was not paying people for their final 2 weeks when they resigned. I was one of those who got stiffed, later got my pay when the state intervened. After I quit, a former employee of mine, a tech writer working on a big project from his home office, decided that the missed and late paydays and horrible treatment from the owner was enough. He decided to quit without notice. He gathered up all the equipment that the company gave him and he took it into the office. He dropped it on the floor and said, "I'm out, B-words." One of the directors asked him if he was going to be available for any transition or other information exchange, to which he replied, "When you pay all the people who've left and still haven't received their pay, I will transition knowledge." To my knowledge, that transition never occurred, yet he received his final 2 weeks' pay and unpaid vacation without issue. Go figure. The Philly Run. A friend worked in Northern Virginia at an office job he hated. On the day he decided he was done, he clocked in, left, drove to Philadelphia over 2.5 hours for a cheesesteak, returned to the office job and clocked out. A bartender I worked with had a really bad run, was a little bit strung out on white snow and life in general, but anyways, we had this really bad day at work and this woman kept pestering us about the service. Eventually, he just took the money she was holding to get our attention, got his lighter out from his pocket, set fire to the bill and held it in front of her while saying something like, "F you, you stupid fricking B-word." Then he just left and never came back. He's kinda crazy, so I'm happy he left. I didn't work with him, but I'm reminded of the JetBlue male flight attendant who popped the emergency exit slide, cracked open 2 beers, drank them on the way down the slide, and left. When the police arrived at his house, he was in the middle of doing the deed with his wife. I guess there comes a point when enough is enough. I like to think I can drink fast, but 2 beers on the slide? I need to shake this man's hand, or probably give him a fist pound through the prison glass. I was shopping at a Walmart one night, probably around 8 or 9, for some laundry detergent. As I was looking for the right aisle, a navy blue collared shirt went soaring from cash register 11 to aisle 14. I turned to my right and saw a shirtless black man with a 90s Mike Tyson fade, a golden Jesus necklace, and a chest tattoo that read Stu Manchu. After watching his shirt slowly float to the ground, he proceeded to go to his register's intercom and say, "Attention all customers, this N-word just quit." After putting his high-flying middle finger down, he ducked underneath his register, went ahead and pulled out a folded Razor scooter with green wheels. He assertively put on his JanSport backpack, pried open the scooter, flung the base of it around his hip, and with one rooster swipe of the shiny Walmart floor, he went from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. The automatic doors diverged like the Red Sea, and the man, without any regret, scooted his way into the arms of unemployment. Been working at Walmart for a good 7 years. The only time anyone actually quit in a way to be any type of story happened about 3 or so years ago. He was a CSM, or a customer service manager, and was at the return desk trying to help these 2 real annoying ladies. They were trying to return something with no receipt. Problem besides the missing receipt was you could tell the item was bought many, many years ago. So once he declined it, they started to cause a scene, making fun of him for working at Walmart and saying he wasn't going anywhere in life, etc., etc. What they didn't know was Walmart was actually his second job, and he actually worked for some government branch. After about 15 minutes of their hazing, he quietly removed his badge, came around the counter, removed his shirt, got on the intercom, yelled he quit, then looked at the 2 ladies and asked, "Now that I don't work here anymore, would you like to go outside like you suggested earlier?" They were shocked and just standing there. Then he just replied with, "I freaking thought so, you stupid hood rats," and then just walked out. While I was working a crappy dishwashing job part-time, one of the other guys who did the shift before me was pretty scummy. Imagine your stereotypical British chav, and it was exactly him. The big dishwashing machine was a little excitable. It would blast water towards the opening hatch so hard that it would leak pretty badly even when sealed shut. So imagine the look of surprise on my face when I walked in for my shift to see a buck-toothed chav, completely undressed, being blasted by scalding hot water from head to toe from an open dishwasher, yet still wearing a backwards-facing cap that was surviving the ordeal. He looked at me and I managed to decipher the opening sentence to, "Done with this crap." Still undressed and soaked, he confidently strode to his Mini Cooper and drove home. I never saw him again after that. Does being a real prick count? I knew a guy who quit Dairy Queen by unplugging all of the freezers and leaving. At my last job, I was working for a telecommunications company which essentially required us to work tons of overtime. I averaged 85 hours a week over a 5-year period. The money was amazing, but the job burned people out. There was one guy, John, who was married to this awful woman. She was clearly cheating on him, she wouldn't work, but he didn't want to leave her because of their kids. As a way to hide from the rest of his life, he was there for 16 years and was an exemplary employee. One day, the guy comes into work dressed in flip-flops, a Hawaiian shirt, and shorts. Dress code was slacks and a company button-down shirt. He drops his set of company keys and his company phone at the manager's desk, was an open bullpen so everyone could see, and said, "Well, the old lady got killed in a car accident yesterday, so F this job and F all of you. I quit." He then gave the boss's boss, who was a real butthole, a two-finger salute and walked out. He was the longest tenured employee they'd ever had. Everyone knew his situation and we all felt bad for him. The boss still gave him a good reference because, as he explained it, everyone has a breaking point. John reached his many years ago. He was given a gift from God in that car accident. Why would I take that away from him? My old boss was a cool dude who smoked a lot of green herb to deal with the stress of that job. That is grim as all heck, but I'm happy for John strolling into the sunset. Also, my long complaint about hospitality hours rarely reached 85 hours a week, and I was done with that after a year. Don't know how these guys blue-pilled themselves into 5 years of that. Co-worker was on his last weekend shift and had already landed a job elsewhere. He never got along with management, but he did his job very well. Call center type of work with 24/7, 365-day support. We have 4 people that work on the weekends, and you have to scan your ID badge and then immediately punch in your 4-digit code. The doors were so scumbaggy that people on the weekday shift would just enter through the main lobby rather than fight the doors. Well, according to his story and the security tapes that support his story, it went down like this. He arrived at 7:50 a.m. and tried to punch in his card. Failed the first time, no big deal. Second attempt was a fail. After his 5th try, he said he became so enraged that he decided to roundhouse kick the keypad. This put a huge hole in the wall. He calmly reached into the wall and scanned his badge and punched in his code. The door opened perfectly. He worked Saturday and Sunday, came in Monday to pick up his check and was promptly told that it was being held for damages to the property. Funniest story ever, especially watching the tapes. It should be noted that he'd had McDonald's for breakfast and had to drop the biggest deuce ever. So waiting for the door to cooperate was apparently not an option. In conclusion, co-worker freaked out at the keypad and roundhouse kicked it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was bartending at the time. One of our bosses had bushy red hair. One night our general manager told him he needed to get a haircut. He proceeded to get quite drunk after work and showed up with a shaved head and a Ziploc bag full of his hair, which he slid under the door to the office. This happened at a Best Buy I was working at right before I started. The story goes that a woman was at the Geek Squad desk yelling at one of our agents, telling him how bad he was at his job and just being a general B-word. After about 15 to 20 minutes or so of him trying to explain what was wrong with her computer and putting up with this behavior, he finally just snapped. My general manager was standing next to him, so he turned to my GM and said, "I quit," then turned back to the lady with enough volume so that the warehouse team could hear him clearly on the opposite side of the store and yelled directly in her face, "Ma'am, you're such a frickin' C-word," and then left forever. Legend has it that in certain parts of the store you can still hear the C-word echoing around the walls. Another time as an assistant manager of a retail outlet, I was passed up for manager yet again, and a drinking buddy of the regional manager got the manager job with 0 experience. I'd already been running the store alone for a few months since the last manager quit. I made sure I had all the keys. The next morning I ordered an Egg McMuffin meal and a coffee and I sat and watched the entire mall open except for our store. A few hours later I got a call. "Yep, I know the store is closed." "I know, because it can't possibly open because I quit. I'm watching the store right now. Definitely closed." They lost most of the day's sales. Screw them. Not really ballsy, but by far one of the funnier things I've ever seen. I was sitting in McDonald's enjoying some chicken nuggets sometime at night when one of the workers starts yelling and tromping around. He tires himself out pretty quickly and leaves with an adamant, "Screw all y'all." Not 5 minutes later, he walks back in and says, "I bet y'all didn't think I was coming back." He keeps bragging about his stellar achievement and then slowly slips in to one of the workers, "Hey, what time are you off? I need a ride." I lost it at that. In conclusion, McDonald's worker quits, leaves in a storm, then walks back in asking for a ride when he can't find one. In all fairness, not many people can work at McDonald's and afford a car. A man and a woman I worked with were fraternizing. There was a no fraternizing clause in our contract. I knew them both fairly well. They told me, and I've seen them together outside of work. It was a stupid clause, but it paid well. Anyway, company meeting, talking about new directions and how they'll start enforcing certain things more strictly. Manager asks for more questions or comments. The guy raises his hand, the manager called on him. F you and F your rules, I quit. He stood up, walked over to the woman and kissed her, turned and gave the manager a finger and walked out. I started clapping. No one joined in. Was at the trash collection facility disposing of an old sofa and maybe a dead working girl when the guy driving one of the blue recycling trucks got into an argument with his boss. The boss told him after he dumped his load of recyclables, he needed to park the truck in front of the shop and come collect his last paycheck because he was fired. I couldn't believe the boss's audacity to expect him to finish working after he had already been fired. The guy flipped the handle on the truck while the boss was walking away, pulled the pins on the tailgate and dumped 4 tons of glass bottles in the middle of the parking lot. The noise was unbelievable, the boss was shouting at him, the employee flipped him the bird, went into the office, and collected his check. It was unfreaking believable. Summer job at landscaping. The job required us to take company trucks to the houses and businesses whose lands were to be scaped. I'd only been there for the summer, but the guy who quit was a full-timer of 4 years. One day he accidentally went to a wrong address. Hey, free flower bed touch-up, and the boss calls him threatening to make him pay. He's in an adjacent town at the time, so he calls his girlfriend to pick him up, leaves the truck where it is, calls the boss, quits, and tells him to go and get his truck. A technician we used to have partially owned an adult club. He came in one morning, ripped out of his gourd in a limo. 3 of the girls who worked for him were there also. He got out of the limo, climbed up onto his toolbox in underwear and cowboy boots only, dancing like crazy. Tells most of the management to get lost, climbs back down and leaves. Needless to say, we hired him back 4 years later. My boss told me that by the end of the day I had to submit the name of one of my 3 employees to be laid off. After discussing with my girlfriend on the phone, I wrote my own name down on a piece of paper and handed it to my boss. The look on his face was priceless. I worked at a bar when I was younger. Actually, I was a minor, but I needed to work and bartending was one of the few jobs that had a schedule that allowed me to go to school at the same time. The 40-something-year-old owner constantly harassed me. I don't mean flirtations or passes, I mean asking me to suck his eggplant, commenting on my juicy meld, and slapping my butt. Real Romeo. He even had an apartment above the bar. I couldn't complain to labor standards because I was working under the table, being underage and all. Anyway, fortunately I had the fortitude to say no and keep myself safe from him, but after a while he became harder to dodge and I couldn't handle other things that were going on at the bar, so I decided to quit. On the night I decided was my last, I didn't charge any customer, mostly regulars, for any of their booze. Ended up giving away a couple of $1,000 in alcohol on the house, and pocketing some pretty generous tips. In the same way, I couldn't report him, he couldn't report me. So in the end, I felt it was a pretty fair F you. In conclusion, boss at a bar was a creep, so I gave out a bunch of booze on the night that I quit. Honestly, good on you. Screw that guy. A couple of $1,000 in the hole might not make a jerk like that reform his ways, but at least you hit him where it hurts. My first day at a new chain convenience store, graveyard shift. I show up, no uniform, old chain was bought out by a new chain, and the clerk is nowhere to be found. The parking lot is full of people loading store products into their cars. The most epic was a lady with a trunk full of Huggies, and every 40-ounce beer bottle the store had left. My first thought was that he was dead or tied up in the back. I looked around for him and couldn't find him. For all I knew, he could have been one of the people emptying the store out. I went behind the counter and the cash register was empty and 2 guys are working hacksaws on the safe under the counter. It took me a while to go through the paperwork thrown everywhere until I found the store manager's phone number. I called him up. Now that I think about it, I'm surprised the phone was still there, and he says to call the police. He's on his way. I told the 2 guys working the safe I was calling the cops, and just as casual as you please, they got up and walked out, announcing to everyone what was happening. They all just casually left. Everyone got out of there before the cops and the manager showed up, and that's when I noticed the door. There was a sign taped to it. It said, "Clerk just quit, the store is unattended. Take what you want." I spent the rest of the shift helping the manager clean up and basically only sold gas the rest of the week while waiting on new inventory to come in. I worked at a pipe drilling company. They issued a substance test. He told me he was accused of cheating, so he got upset, undid his overalls and with nothing underneath, proceeded to talk Ace Ventura style out of his butthole, saying that he would never cheat, then stood up and whipped his eggplant around lasso style, followed by a move we now call the peeing helicopter. Managed to fill the test cup. 13-panel test and he was positive for 12. The woman giving the test had 1 week to go before retiring but said it didn't matter and quit right then and there. and left a little less dry than when she'd come in. In conclusion, spinning around and peeing gets you fired. I used to work at this restaurant, and one day I got a frantic call from my boss asking me if I could come in and work. Apparently, the cashier and the sushi chef, who were dating, just flat out left. The only other people working there were the cooks, and they had no idea they were gone until a good half hour or so later. I thought it was pretty ballsy and stupid of them to just leave the restaurant unattended. Someone could have easily stolen one of the TVs, money from the register, or even stuff from the sushi bar. My Spanish teacher once told me a great story about how he quit his telemarketing job. He was in college at our crappy community college and just decided to stop going to work. He went back 6 months later, acted like he'd done nothing wrong and they didn't notice. He never went to work at the telemarketing center ever again. A year after, they called him and told him it wasn't working out. I'm a lifeguard. At our facility, we have certain whistle signals that we use to signify certain things. Well, one of those signals was one that meant spinal injury, and not just some, oh, he's got whiplash kind of thing, like, oh crap, his spine is broken. Anyway, this guy apparently had had enough of working in our water park and decided to just leave his stand in the middle of his shift while blowing that signal on his whistle. Paramedics were called, and by the time they arrived, he was long gone. It was quite an interesting day. A couple of years ago, my friends and I sat at the Rhine and we were having a great time. It was a hot summer day and we had a little barbecue. On the Rhine, there are a lot of tourist boats cruising up and down between Koblenz and Cologne. We sat there and suddenly we heard a loud splash from one of the smaller boats that was approaching us. It was a guy who jumped off the boat and swam to the shore, got out of the water and walked away. Later, I read in the newspaper that this was an employee who'd had enough. Still brings a smile to my face. I worked in an office, and one guy collected all of the little round paper discs from whenever we used the 3-hole punch. He put them all into an empty coffee can, almost full, and then he rage quit after a dispute with the boss and flung that can, full of tiny paper discs, all over the office like confetti. It's been over a year since he left, and we're still picking those things up. No joking, an employee came to work with a Glock and domed himself in the parking lot. What nerve! Didn't even give his 2-week notice. My friend worked at a popular fast food chain. Their policy was to throw out food that was left by the end of the day. The manager was a huge jerk and was being even worse on this particular day. He also refused to give my friend his overtime pay. A few hours before closing time, my friend grabbed 2 bags and stuffed with burgers and chicken. His co-workers were in on this. He walked home while handing out food to homeless people. Oh, and he wrote, "You're a prick" on the manager's MacBook with a Sharpie. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.